So now you're here again, knocking at my door. A little too late for, I'm sorry for. The lights went out cause you kept cutting the cord, and I started to fade into your gray. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better without you inside. It's time to be someone I wanna recognize. The future starts right now. I made a reservation, but you never came, so I'm checking out. The fire you stole away, I know one day we'll come back around. The future is now. The future is now. The future is now. I waited for you in the passenger seat. There's only so far I can ride in your dreams. While you were chasing everything else but me, I'm starting to break out from your gray. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better without you inside. It's time to be someone I wanna recognize. The future starts right now. I made a reservation, but you never came, so I'm checking out. The fire you stole away, I know one day we'll come back around. The future is now. The future is now. I'm not backing down, cause the future is now. Not backing down, cause the future is now. The future starts right now. I made a reservation, but you never came, so I'm checking out. The fire you stole away, I know one day we'll come back around. The future is now. The future
Dear online participants, guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stage Bob, the second stage at our Quantum Summit. The focus here will be quantum computing for the entire day today. We will look at other quantum technologies on this stage tomorrow. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. My name is Roman Benson. I'm the head of IT infrastructure here at Bitkom, and it will be my pleasure to guide you through the program today. Before we start with our first presentation, a few remarks, especially on our speakers corner. At this stage, you will have the chance, the opportunity to meet the speakers of each and every presentation today. So the 15 minutes directly following the presentations, you can meet the speakers in an extra room, an extra meeting room, a Zoom meeting room. You can find the link to that. It's marked in red and should read something like meet the speaker at your platform next to the video. It is a pleasure now for me to welcome our first two speakers with the first presentation. They are Oliver Kolb, product manager at NextLab at the German railway operator Deutsche Bahn. He studied mathematics and computer science. He worked as a professor for 7 years before he decided to join his current employer, Deutsche Bahn, NextLab. And also our second speaker, Christian Münch. He is solution architect digital incubation at Fujitsu, and he also holds a PhD in mathematics. Welcome, Christian. Welcome, Kolb. I'm looking forward to, I think, a very interesting introducing talk for this stage on quantum-inspired railway schedule planning. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and also to everyone else for joining this talk. So this was one out of 2 projects which we did together within our cooperation between Fujitsu and the Deutsche Bahn. And it's on the one hand very interesting from a theoretical point of view, because it shows some potential of quadratic formulations within combinatorial optimization problems. And it's at the same time also a business relevant problem. And therefore we are happy to get the opportunity to share the results within this audience. And I directly want to hand over to Oliver for the problem introduction.
Thank you, Christian. So for us at DB Netz, it's a big part of our daily business to provide capacity for trains. And this is based on so-called train path requests. Roughly speaking, such a train path request contains information about starting, ending, and intermediate points of your desired route, about time windows, about dwell times, and of course also about the train itself, the so-called train characteristics. And then based on these information, there are several things to be done already during the scheduling process. So first of all, you have to find a route on the railway network suitable to your request. Then on this route, you have to consider the full driving dynamics of the train, including all the technical restrictions you have. And then finally, you also have to take care about allocation. So on the tracks you would like to use, they're typically blocked at certain times by other trains or due to maintenance. And of course, you have to take care about this information. So lots of things to be considered during the scheduling process for each single train. And if we now look at the short-term business, there we have a first come, first served principle. So you can actually handle one train request after the other. And in this short-term business, we are already able to do the scheduling for trains, for almost every second train fully automatically. And that's a difference to a strong difference to the long-term business, which we considered with Fujitsu, where the support of the scheduling process is still work in progress. And the main difference we have here is that we do not have this first come, first served principle, but we more or less have to treat thousands of train requests simultaneously. And of course, if you start to construct train paths for these requests, you quickly run into some allocation conflicts, and you somehow have to handle those. So the actual use case we considered in our cooperation with Fujitsu is the following. For all the train requests, we wanted to pre-construct path candidates, all of them fulfilling all the requirements of the corresponding request. So each of them would be fine in the final schedule. And then based on these pre-constructed path candidates, the task is to build a schedule without any conflicts between the chosen paths. And if it's not possible to fulfill all the requests, the task is to fulfill as many as possible of them. And within our project at DB Netz, we already had a mathematical problem formulation for this task as a linear optimization problem, where we maximize the number of fulfilled requests while avoiding any conflicts in the schedule. And at least in this basic form, this problem is equivalent to a well-known task known from graph theory, namely the maximum independent set problem, where the nodes of the graph correspond to our path candidates and the edges correspond to conflicts. And this is a quite valuable information when you think about solution strategies apart from applying some standard solver, which is of course possible when you have this LP formulation to just apply some state-of-the-art solver here. Nevertheless, for our cooperation with Fujitsu, where we wanted to apply their digital annealer, neither of these problem formulation directly works. So what we actually needed was reformulation as the QUBO, a quadratic unconstrained binary optimization problem. And indeed, that's also possible for this decision problem to reformulate this as a QUBO. Coming back to our use case, so we have two modeling and two solution approaches we wanted to compare in this cooperation. First, the LP approach we already had with some state-of-the-art LP solver, and on the other hand, the reformulation as a QUBO and the digital annealer provided by Fujitsu. And additionally to the basic model I showed you on the last slide, we also considered an extended model with some additional type of constraints, some soft constraints, which are conditions we would like to be fulfilled within a schedule, but those are no mandatory conditions. And we can formulate these conditions as well in the LP model as in the QUBO. So again, we have both modeling and solution approaches which we can compare to each other. And at this point, I hand over back to Christian.
Thank you. A few words on the model translation. So given the conflict graph, we formulated the corresponding QUBO, which is then to be minimized by the digital annealer. The first term here is the actual optimization target to choose as many paths as possible in the solution. The second term is to be minimized to 0 in order to obtain an optimal valid solution, and it takes care of the conflicts. So no conflict must be part of the solution. The third term is for the soft conflicts. So those are conflicts which are not completely undesirable in the solution, but can be part of the solution if this results in a larger number of paths. Within the project, we first considered smaller problems with up to 1,000 train path requests and 8,000 path candidates. From the map of path candidates, which were partially conflicting each other, we constructed the corresponding conflict graph, formulated the QUBO, minimized that with the digital annealer, and translated the solution back to the business solution. And since we could solve all these problems to optimality, we then went a step further and also considered larger problems. The largest one had almost 12,000 train path requests with more than 67,000 path candidates. And this gives rise to a lot of possible schedules. Also, the conflict graph looks much more complicated here. And this is a little bit shown in the picture. And because the problem was too big to be solved with the digital annealer version 2 within one iteration, we had to come up with a decomposition approach. And we did a greedy strategy here to extract the dense part of the graph, then formulated the corresponding sub-problem, solved that with the digital annealer, and continued then in an iterative approach to obtain a solution. And we did that for the problem with only hard conflicts first. And then we did a similar approach for the problem with additional soft constraints. We also got the chance to try our digital annealer version 3 on the problem with the soft constraints. And here we did not need any decomposition because it can handle up to 100,000 bits. And the results here look like this. So the left two columns are the results for the problem with only hard conflicts. Here, the digital annealer version 2 with decomposition, as you can see, achieves a number of fulfilled requests in the range of the linear solver which we compared ourselves with. For the problem with soft conflicts, with additional soft conflicts, you can see that the digital annealer version 2 and 3 achieve substantially more requests than for the problem without the soft conflicts, so with only the hard conflicts. And at the same time, you can see that the linear solver struggles a little bit with these additional soft conflicts. For the runtime, here in dark gray, you can see the time to the first solution for the linear solver. And for the problem with only hard conflicts, this time is very similar to the time that the digital annealer version 2 with decomposition requires. For the problem with additional soft conflicts, the digital annealer version 2 with decomposition and the digital annealer version 3 require runtime very similar to that of the problem without the soft conflicts. And also the linear solver finds a first solution very quickly, but then struggles to find a better solution, at least for 2 hours. So why is that? That's because of the quadratic nature of the problem with soft conflicts. A hard conflict in the linear formulation looks like this. So we have 2 problem-specific variables, and at most one of them can be 1 at the same time. In the quadratic formulation, it looks like this. So we have a relaxed version of this constraint, namely we want to minimize 2 times the product of these 2 variables, and this then gives rise to the same solution. A soft conflict in the linear formulation looks like this. So here we need an auxiliary variable and a constraint which says, okay, this variable, which is also a binary variable, is 1 if both problem-specific variables are 1 at the same time. And in that case, we add an additional cost, in this case here, some alpha, to the optimization function. In the quadratic formulation, that's a little bit easier. And the formulation here looks very similar to the hard conflict, but just with a smaller prefactor value alpha. And if we have a lot of such soft conflicts, then in the linear formulation, we need a lot of auxiliary variables. And for our largest problem, this were then almost 3 times the number of problem-specific variables. In the quadratic formulation, we need no auxiliary variables, and that's where the advantage comes from, because the digital annealer can handle such quadratic problems here. Yeah, and with that, I want to hand over back to Oliver for the conclusion.
Thank you. So to just give a brief conclusion on what we saw. So in all the scenarios we considered within our cooperation, the digital annealer could quickly provide good solutions to the problems, where we saw some slight advantages for the basic model, but also here the digital annealer could at least deliver comparable solutions. On the other hand, for this extended model, we saw really clear advantages of the Cubo reformulation and the application of the digital annealer. So altogether, what one can say is to apply the digital annealer or similar techniques in our context of train scheduling might certainly be an interesting option, of course, depending on the future requirements we have within our scheduling processes. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Thank you very much, Christian, for this very interesting and inspiring first contribution and talk on our stage, Bob. I think we have a few minutes left in this slot, so we should have the time for 1 or 2 questions. The first question I would hand over to you, or would read to you from the audience, was the question. I think I can't see it anymore now, but I think it was, can this problem be, can this approach be adapted to other problems except railway schedule planning? I think the example given in the question was, for example, hospital staff planning or scheduling or other problems.
Or you can answer, Christian.
Yeah, yeah, of course it can be used for other problems as well. So for the hospital planning, it sounds a little bit like, for example, no 2 rooms, no two beds can be booked at the same time, and this would then be a hard conflict, a hard constraint. But maybe there are also soft constraints which are interesting in for this problem. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think another question I saw was understanding what exactly is the relationship to quantum computing here, comparing it to classical annealers. What makes this digital annealer directly connected with quantum computing? Maybe you can explain this again in a little more detail for the audience.
So the digital annealer is no quantum computing, it's quantum inspired. And so this can be seen because it also, like in quantum annealing, minimizes Ising models, QUBOs, quadratic unconstrained binary optimization problems. And yeah, the digital annealer does this by
I think the main difference of the digital annealer in comparison to the classical computer solving the same problem is the generation of good candidates within the solution process, because it generates in parallel very many solution candidates, and this would take a lot of time to do this one after the other or even parallel. So these are thousands of candidates, and that's the relationship with some probabilities inside.
Well, thank you very much also for answering the questions. I think we don't have time right now for more questions in this circle, but as I mentioned earlier, the speakers will be available for the next 15 minutes in our speakers corner. So if you have more questions, I saw already more questions here in the question function of the platform. Please feel free to head over to the Meet the Speakers possibility and discuss directly with Christian and Oliver. Thank you once again for your nice and inspiring talk. And we will head over directly to the next talk, which is today by Jens Jeschner. Jens Jeschner, he holds a degree in international finance from the Frankfurt University of Applied Sciences. He works since 2019 as a data scientist for Main Incubator, and today he's going to talk about applied research on quantum computing for financial services. Welcome to our stage, Jens. I'm looking forward to your talk, and the stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Roman. Thanks for having me here. So, welcome everybody. So, the reason why I would like to talk about applied research on quantum computing in financial services, especially, is because since we often talk to our clients from Commerzbank, from other companies, so and they're often like wondering, so or wow, there's like the banking industry or financial services industry is actually like researching quantum technologies, and it's maybe more common among like the really large banks in the States, but here in Europe or in Germany, it's not that common. And so since then, we thought, okay, like maybe it could be beneficial for you to get a little bit more insight to see, okay, how our approach of R&D works, and yeah, maybe this is also something that can be beneficial for you then. So yeah, since we're talking about Main Incubator, let me briefly introduce Main Incubator. We are the R&D unit of the Commerzbank Group. We are a 100% subsidiary of Commerzbank. And what you can here see, we have this three main pillars here in our structure, namely prototyping, where we try and develop new prototypes based on different technologies. So we have a couple of technologies here that change over time. And for these technologies, we want to explore, okay, what are the impacts, and especially for the financial services industry, and how can they be beneficial for us? So this is where we're trying to build prototyping for these various kinds of technologies. Then we also have our next pillar, which is like the venture capital arm. Basically, like what we're doing here is early stage investments in young startups, especially like fintechs. Maybe most of them are basically like from the financial services industry, but others also like from legal tech to prop tech and everything. So it's also like, but here our focus is not only to, let's say, build these or just to invest in these companies for just simply return on investment, but whether as a strategic investment, since we want to incorporate their solutions into Commerzbank or into the clients from Commerzbank. So this is what you can see here. This is our portfolio of startups that we're invested in. And also you can see everything that has this yellow tick mark. Basically, these are already implemented in Commerzbank and clients, and we aim to increase that number. So it's currently at around 60%. So, and our third pillar is that like community development part, where we actually trying to form communities and to establish also communities. So this can range from various levels, as you can see, starting from federal to associations, but also startups, think tanks, academia. So we're really trying to connect with as interesting parts or parties outside there, just because it doesn't really make sense just to do your things on your own, and collaboration is really one of our key elements that we are building on. So, for example, we're also holding this Between the Towers event, which is quite famous in Frankfurt, like once in a month, where different startups can pitch their ideas for fintechs and everything. So, but since we're here about talking quantum computing today, let's move out to our next part. And okay, obviously before that, so you can see we also get recognized by others, by Handelsblatt, Statista, and so on. So we are really proud to see this, that we actually like get also acknowledged for our accomplishments here, and that's basically like why we also think that our approach seems like a quite nice way to do things. And so yeah, coming to the prototyping side, this is basically like how our main approach is for the prototyping for basically like every prototype that we are trying to build. So we have this so-called technology readiness level, which is actually originates from the aerospace and industry, like especially from NASA, in which you place every technology based on, or where you rank your technologies based on how ready the level is, the technological level to be implemented in a practical environment. So, for example, what you can here see is the top three tier L7 to 9, the green ones. These are basically like technologies that are already in production, that are not really, as at least from a perspective of financial services, and that's where we focus here. Financial services not really that much interesting for us anymore, for an R&D unit. But then we have these yellow technologies, and this is basically how we rank our different technologies. So you can see, like, for example, machine learning and everything that's already largely used in production. That's why it's not for main incubator, but we are really focused on the yellow ones in the middle, like networks, quantum computing, IoT, and stuff like this. But every time, bear in mind, this is from the perspective of financial services industry. So if you have a view from this from maybe from aerospace industry, you probably rank this different. But yeah, for financial services, this is how we approach this. And then you can also see like the lower ones, the blue ones, these are technologies that we expect to have major influence in the next like 5 to 10 years, so rather far in the future. So, and basically like what we're doing with our prototypes is here, we do have for each of these technologies where we develop these prototypes, we've developed this so-called banking map here, where you can see on the 6 outermost dimensions. This is basically like the fundamental areas where banking or financial services interact with, like market infrastructure, deposit and lending, insurance, capital markets, investment management, and payments. So basically you can place every business operation into one of these 6 pillars here. And this is basically, and then we're trying to see in the middle of this, or the inner dimensions, you can see the evolvement over time, how these technologies will evolve over time. And that's where we're trying to build our prototypes and see, okay, what is the evolution here? And now coming to the quantum computing prototypes that we are developing, or approach for developing these. So I mean, there's a large hype about quantum computing when you, especially like when you're new to the field. Then what you can see is, okay, you see all this like we're having these like you can break like RSA encryption within seconds, and you can basically compute the most complex problems in seconds. And then you have like the reality where you need to like accomplish this on programming gate level quantum devices, having a lot of let's say restrictions. And this is basically like what we can see here. So because what we're doing is applied research, what this means is we are trying to evaluate, okay, what is actually like the real business practicability, and especially like for the near future. This means like in the next, like, let's say 2 to 5 years, and not only like in 10 years plus or something. So we can see there's a lot of as you all know, like hardware constraints for the quantum computing side. We have limited amounts of computing and storage power, so qubits available. We do have all these like quantum effects that we more or less like decoherence and everything. But then also we have these algorithmic challenges, because basically like we're working on such a low levels. It's comparable to assembly language in classical computing. So which makes it also really challenging to implement new algorithms. And then last but not least, we do have also, like when we're talking about real business practicability, how adequate, how can you measure, like, is there really a benefit for a specific business problem or use case in the quantum computing industry, which is also not very clear often. And because last but not least, there has to be some value added in this whole like value chain here. So, and our approach to handle these basically, like you can see, this is more or less like this research our strategies. Basically, it's displayed as a cycle because there's no clear end or start. So you can basically start at let's say almost any point here. But like, let's say one of the most important key factors for us, and as you already mentioned, is partnerships. We really like to partner with others, especially like also from cross industries, but also within the financial sector, financial service industry sector. And our next part is basically like the development or the identification of potential use cases, which is also not that trivial, but yeah, that's what you need to really like building prototypes and demonstrate, okay, how this works. And that's where we also place our engineering skills here and develop software and run experiments in-house. So it's really about like getting this understanding of these topics and not just like okay, reading books or watching videos on YouTube, because like that's not how you gain like truly knowledge about this. So, and last but not least, you also need to assess, okay, how is the market evolving? Because as we all know, we are in the early stage of this technology. So it's very crucial for at least for most of the use cases to know, okay, what can we expect from the hardware achievements in the next couple of years? I mean, this is obviously a highly difficult task, but still it's necessary to really understand, okay, how valuable can quantum computing, yeah, for the near term future. And so how we approach this is basically like, okay, we can have a look at common problems that are in the common quantitative business models. So because since we need something that you can express like in rather complex models, because I mean it doesn't really make sense for using a quantum computing just to multiply to numbers. I mean that's not really useful. So we're trying to have a look, okay, where could this be used? Like, and on the left side you can see like the traditional like banking use cases like risk engineering, financial risk management, financial engineering. But we also look at a bit more less like investment side. So for example, like having complex decision-making problems, scenario analysis, like for example, originating from game theory and stuff like this, can be really, really challenging for classical computers. But since a bank or any financial or any other financial services company is basically also a business company, so there can also be benefits arising for marketing and sales, for example, by optimizing marketing stuff, but also like from various other operations such as cybersecurity, which is not really in the context of quantum computing, but rather on other quantum technologies such as quantum communication and so on. So, and then we have this like, let's say, three classical parts, or where you can like really use quantum technologies, which is like simulation, optimization, and machine learning. And you can basically see that a lot of these, like for example, risk management, financial engineering problems, we fall under these simulation parts. In the investment evaluation, you can also see there's a lot of optimization problems, but of course it's not limited. And you can see agent-based models, for example, reinforcement learning is also very challenging. And maybe quantum computing will be a great help for us to accomplish our goals here and to see, okay, to really understand this technology and see what it can do for us. So, and coming to the next part, it's basically like, okay, how are we approaching this by developing software? So, and as I already mentioned, so we are really trying to build our software in-house, meaning like starting from the beginning, like from end to end, and not only just use some like ready-to-use software tools that are outside there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's no disrespect for all these tools here. We highly appreciate them, but it's really crucial for us to get a real deep understanding of let's say basically like every single building block. We want to see, okay, how can you actually like formulate your problem, your business problem, as a quantum problem? So how can you actually like run this problem on different quantum devices? How can you construct circuits? How can you like build Hamiltonians from all of this? And therefore we have all these tools, for example, like the qubit generator, and also like built an own quantum annealing simulator, which we primarily use for benchmarking like some of our experiments here. And yeah, that's basically what we're trying to build here. So yeah, this is well, yeah, exactly. And last but not least, there we have our last point here, which is like according to the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, which announced that there should be some more programs on jointly cooperating on these quantum computing topics. We will also like having our quantum circle, which is like a German-based community aimed for jointly developing quantum computing use cases and getting on with this technology, which will be announced next week at our Between the Towers event. And yeah, that's basically it. And I'm really happy to hear questions, and thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much for this very interesting talk about all those use cases, especially in the financial sector at Main Incubator. Let me ask first, so you mentioned those cooperations already, for example, with Commerzbank, but what do you think, when can we actually expect those use cases to be applied in real life? When are we talking about actual application of quantum computing for the financial services sector?
Yeah, that's a most interesting question of all, because I guess that's what we all like to know. And it's very difficult to tell often, because you can see that okay, there are, let's say, for example, problems where you already know that sorry,
no problem,
that you already know need, for example, let's say 1 million or 1 billion qubits, and then we can say, okay, this is probably not going to be a case that can be done in the next let's say 3 or 5 years. But as we come into some, for example, like combinatorial optimization problems, then you can actually see that for some problems, like having a really good precision is really crucial. And then you can see, okay, maybe even with 1,000 or let's say, yeah, for example, 1,000 qubits, you can actually like achieve much better results than today, because you cannot solve 1,000 bit problems or 1,000 problems with thousands of binary variables in brute force on a classical device. And classical heuristics often don't perform very well for these cases. So, and yeah.
Thank you very much also for answering the question. I currently don't see further questions from the audience here, but of course I want to point out that once again there is the possibility to get into direct contact with you and discuss with you in our speakers corner, where you will head on to now right after the talk. Thank you very much once again for your very interesting contribution, and I leave you to go, so to say, into the speaker's corner, and will use the chance to point out a few things in between here, which is first, you have already realized, I guess, that we have this, apart from the speaker's corner afterwards, that we have this live chat function, so please make use of it. You see, if we have time at the end of the talks, we can include directly your questions. You can also get into contact with the other participants. Maybe they want to comment already on your remarks or questions. Feel free to use this option, this opportunity. I also want to point out that we will upload all the videos from today, not just from this stage, but from the Quantum Summit in general, to the platform, I think tomorrow already. So you can see everything that was shown today again later as a video if you have registered, which you obviously have if you're here with us. And I also would like to point out that it's very helpful for you, if you want to get into contact with other people, to complete your profile. You have this profile in the Swapcard platform, which we are watching, which you are watching this video stream on right now. So you can fill in your details there. You can get into direct contact with other people. You can even initiate direct chats with other interested participants of this conference. So please feel free to also use this option and opportunity of our platform here, of our conference platform. Last but not least, I want to use the chance to thank our partners of the summit, especially our premium partners. Our premium partners in the Quantum Summit are Fujitsu, Athos, and the Fraunhofer Association. So thank you very much to our partners here for supporting this summit and making it possible thereby. Now let's head on to our next contribution on stage, Bob. Our next speaker is today, we have two speakers in the next section. The first speaker is Sven Kerstan. Sven Kerstan is the head of research of Just Quantum. He has a very inspiring CV, I have to say. He studied math at the University of Cambridge. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics from King's College London, and he did a postdoc at the Center for Theoretical Physics in Groningen. He has spent more than 10 years in trading and risk management until he joined Just Quantum in 2019, where he is the head of research. Our second speaker today is Rory McLaren. He is a technology strategist in the CTO office of Deutsche Börse Group, and he holds a degree in computer science from the University of Glasgow. Welcome to both of you. Welcome Sven, welcome Rory. Your talk is titled A Quantum Algorithm for the Sensitivity Analysis of Business Risks. Welcome to Quantum Summit, welcome to Stage Bob. We're looking forward to your talk. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session. I hope you're finding the presentations so far as interesting as I am. As per the introduction, I am Rory McLaren, and I lead the Quantum Initiative at Deutsche Börse Group. And today I'll be presenting with Dr. Sven Kersten from US Quantum, the company that we partnered with to develop our first use case on the sensitivity analysis of business risk. I'd like to take a few moments at the start just to talk about the business context that prompted us to explore this area before Sven then continues and talks in detail about the approach to applying quantum methods to it and the results that we achieved. As always, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of our talk, and we'll both be available on the Meet the Speakers session if you'd like to engage further. So Deutsche Börse Group covers many different activities in financial markets, and as a result, they can be impacted by many different types of external events. In order to manage the financial risks associated with these events, we perform business risk modeling, where we create models that show the potential impact in terms of financial losses based on the estimated probability of certain macroeconomic events occurring. These events may have independent probability of occurring, as well as interlinked probabilities. The models can then be analyzed using a Monte Carlo style simulation to give a probability distribution for the losses. And this is the current approach that we use, and with classical computing hardware, this can be performed in a totally acceptable time frame for our business use. The challenge arises when we perform sensitivity analysis on the model. And that's to say, when we try to determine whether small changes in the estimated probability of events occurring can have significantly overall impact on the outcome of the model. Based on the size of our current risk model, if we were to test the sensitivity by varying each single parameter independently, it would take days of computation time. Testing the sensitivity based on varying all pairs of parameters would take years, and all triplets would take centuries of computation time. And it's this complexity that led us to investigate whether a quantum algorithm could be applied to the problem. And at this stage, I'd like to hand over to Sven, who'll present the details on the use case. Sven, over to you.
Thank you, Rory. So, as Rory just said, I'm Sven from Just Quantum. Just Quantum is a small quantum software company. And well, what we generally do right now is we look at interesting use cases, and the one with Deutsche Börse certainly is one, we think. And in the process of it, we develop new quantum algorithms sometimes. And the interesting thing here is that it's quantum software for a real-world problem, as Rory just explained. So let's look at the problem in some more detail. As Rory said, Deutsche Börse has risks in various places in the world, in various business lines, and they can threaten revenues. And I give you a tiny example here. For example, in some country X, there might be a certain risk that a political crisis occurs. There might also be a certain risk that the exchange rate volatility increases. and there might be a risk that the country is downgraded by the rating agencies. All three factors might impact the revenues. For example, the volatility increase might mean that it's getting much more expensive to hedge the exposure because the foreign currency in country X might have to be converted back to euros. So each of these things has a number associated with it here. 20% risk of a political crisis, 5% risk of a volatility increase, 10% risk of a ratings downgrade. But as Rory already mentioned, in general, such risks will be connected. So a political crisis, for example, may well trigger a volatility increase in the exchange rates. It can happen on its own. The volatility can just, the markets sometimes do that for no apparent reason. The volatility shoots up. But if there is a political crisis, there's a clear trigger. And in that case, it gets much more likely that we see such a risk. And here, for example, we say it's 40% that a political crisis, if it occurs, does lead to an FX volatility increase. Now, that's a tiny section of the overall business model, which basically covers all conceivable risks all over the world. So you have this huge interconnected graph of things that can trigger each other or be triggered in their own right. And the risks cover competition, regulation, the markets, elections, and even the pandemic. All these things and some others as well will be in there. Now, how do you actually work with this thing? So to evaluate the risk, as I said, first of all, you have to, of course, list all these risks. So you list all the risks and all the dependencies, which risk can trigger which other risk. And then you have to estimate the probabilities for each of the, well, we call them intrinsic probabilities, and for the transition probabilities, so that one risk triggers another risk. Now, once you're done with that, you run a Monte Carlo simulation to simulate what could happen given this set of probabilities. You have to do this many times. Why? Well, because there are many, many outcomes, and some of them are quite unlikely, and you want to get a good idea of what can happen. So in the first run, maybe the first here, the root node is triggered, and the transition triggers the second one and the third one, but nothing else. That would be one outcome. Second run, you trigger the root node again, but this time you trigger, the bottom black node here. Third run, something else again. You do this a million times, and you can plot a histogram of the results. How many risks have been triggered? Or if you want to make it one step more fancy, each risk can be assigned a financial loss. And they can be different for each risk, but let's forget about that for the moment. So on the y-axis here is the probability of this outcome happening. And outcome here means the financial impact for Deutsche Börse. And you see there will be some shape like this. So there's a relatively high risk that there's a low impact, but there will be a tail in this distribution, which means there is a non-zero risk for a high financial impact. And that's, of course, what the risk manager is interested in, because if he sees that the risk in the tails is too high, he will have to take action. Some risk mitigation has to take place, and that's how the model is used. Now, again, as Rory already indicated, all these probabilities are estimated numbers, because for one-off events, you cannot really base this on anything else. And even if you can get some sort of statistics, they will not be very good. So you can never be quite sure if the number you put in is exactly right. Even after the fact, you can never verify, of course. So, if I say item 1 had a probability of 10% occurring, it could just as well have been 11, right? Or maybe 14, who knows? And this goes for every single number that is put into this model. Of course, you can do some checks for how bad are things in the obvious places, but to thoroughly check the impact of each of these little changes that you could make, and that still would more or less fit your opinion about what could happen, is a computational issue. And why? Well, if you run the simulation once, even on a big computer, you don't click and get the result. You'll have an extended coffee break before even your big computer gives you back your answer. Now, typically, this model has hundreds of inputs, which means if you change the first parameter, see what happens. You get a new histogram. Change the second parameter, you get a new histogram. A third parameter, get a new histogram. Maybe they're all fine so far. You know, the tails look more or less the same. Everything's good. But to really be sure that none of them change the tails too much, you have to go through the entire list of hundreds of parameters. This means that you'll have hundreds of coffee breaks in a row before you get your answer. And again, as Rory already mentioned, maybe the impact of changing pairs, two parameters at the same time, may have a much bigger impact than changing one, because you might make certain avalanches in this model much more likely. So you might want to check all pairs of parameters as well. And changing the pairs of 1,000 parameters means you have to do 500,000 runs of your Monte Carlo simulation, and then you really have a problem. So as I said, then what you're probably interested in is your original result and the biggest impact that you managed to find when you modified your parameters. And then you might see that, well, whatever way around you look at it, the financial impact at your 99.5 percentile or whatever you're interested in shifts a lot. Or if you look at it the other way around, the financial loss that you're willing to take becomes maybe 2 times as likely or something like that. So to know how stable the result is under changes of your inputs, you would have to go through all the possibilities with your simulation, and that will take a long time. So let me show you the results in graphic form. On the x-axis here, you see the number of input parameters. As I said, it's typically hundreds that can change every time you run the simulation, but hundreds is a good guess. So it can be up to about maybe 1,000, maybe a bit less. And if you look at the pairs of parameters and how long it would take on a classical machine, you'll get to roughly 10 years, a bit more of 1,000 parameters. Obviously, you can't wait that long. The quantum solution that we wrote, so we implemented this sensitivity analysis as a quantum program. Well, it also increases in the number of inputs, but you don't really notice it. It increases so little that you don't really see the increase at all on this scale here. The quantum solution in this example would be extrapolated to take 23 minutes. Why do I say extrapolated? Well, the quantum hardware for gate-based quantum computers that can actually run our model in the size run in practice is not available yet. This is a few years away. So we had to make some assumptions about, what that hardware looks like and how it performs. That plus the details of the implementation can, of course, easily mean that our estimates are off by a factor of 10 or 20 even. But we got a speed increase of a factor of 200,000 here. So it's fairly obvious that this will help you a lot when you switch to quantum. Let me finally tell you what we think is pretty cool about this particular project. So first of all, this is a bit more for the experts now. When you take this risk model and implement it as a quantum circuit, it's incredibly efficient. Each risk can be represented by just 1 qubit, and each transition by a singly controlled gate. So it was a bit of a surprise to us when we saw how nicely this problem goes through in a quantum circuit implementation. What may be even nicer is the structure that the quantum solution has. So we implemented the risk model, used the Deutsche Börse as a quantum circuit, but then we ran a quantum amplitude estimation on it. Well, not a surprise for those who know what that means. It's essentially a way of doing Monte Carlo simulations on a quantum computer. But then we search with a Grover algorithm over the results of the quantum amplitude estimation. And what does that mean? Well, it means we run a Grover algorithm with oracles which are actually imperfect. So usually people look at oracles as telling you with certainty if something is true or not. It gives you back a 1 or a 0. But that decision is one of our solutions or not is here taken by a quantum amplitude estimation, which, well, doesn't work with certainty. It gives you back a certain probability or probability amplitude that the thing is one of the ones you look for. And the really nice thing is it does work. So you might be a bit skeptical when you first think about it, but let me assure you, it does work. And the third thing which is quite nice about this is you can take the same idea and apply it to related fields. Credit risk, operational risk seem obvious, interesting areas where you can essentially use the same technique. So for those of you who are interested in the details are in a paper on the archive. Here's the URL, and it's called A Quantum Algorithm for the Sensitivity Analysis of Business Risks. And with that, I would like to thank you for your interest. And if there are any questions for Rory or myself, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you so much for this very inspiring talk, very interesting and quite convincing, I have to say. I think what would be interesting to me is the idea eventually to do this, like to acquire the first working quantum computers with enough power or enough qubits to do this yourself, or is it like as soon as you get the opportunity to do this remotely, even on let's say one of the big companies which are currently building quantum computers to implement those calculations, to implement those algorithms and setups that you have just shown us?
I think, I suppose.
Yeah. I suppose referring back to Mark Scott's presentation earlier, it's not clear yet whether we'll all have a quantum chip in our cell phones in our pocket, or whether these will be cloud-based resources that we can gain access to. At the moment, we used cloud capabilities to simulate this and perform this at a small scale. And so that seems like the logical first step as quantum hardware develops further. But clearly in the future, we may find that we all have a quantum resource that we have access to. So I guess we rule nothing out at this stage.
Thank you. That makes sense, I guess. So is the idea currently, maybe to both of you, the question, like, I mean, from different perspectives, obviously, to prepare everything for as soon as you can use it on a larger scale, to actually apply it in the markets. So from the Deutsche Börse point of view, the like, use it for your purposes, and maybe to use quantum to as soon as it becomes really possible to apply this the way it's supposed to work, and also sell this to other companies then.
Yeah, I can go first. I think the idea is indeed to get ready now, because once the machines are there, it will be too late to start thinking about it. So we want to have as much ready by then in terms of the algorithms, in terms of the, all the technology that you need to run these things in the best possible way on the hardware. Yeah.
Yeah, and from a Deutsche Börse perspective, we're conducting these quantum sort of lighthouse projects because we want to be able to be in the right place, be in the sort of Goldilocks zone for quantum computing, not too early, but definitely not too late. So this is a practical example where we can investigate and understand how fast we need to move to just be in that right spot. So that was the real purpose, I think, behind exploring this use case.
Thank you very much also for your answers. I think this is a very nice conclusion here to get ready early, because this is also supposed to be one of the messages that we want to send with our conference, with our Quantum Summit, to the industry, which is one of our main target groups here, of course, to get ready to engage with these new technologies, to be interested in it and explore the possibilities as early as possible, because as you have just said, Sven, when the technology will be available, when those quantum computers will be available, it's probably to start to investigate this, to start working on it. You should already be ready. So thank you very much for this inspiration also. Once again, you will head over to the speakers corner now, so our audience will be free for the next approximately 15 minutes to interact with you there, which I want to invite everyone to. I say goodbye to you too and welcome our next speaker to the stage, which is Martin Leib. Martin Leib studied theoretical physics at the University of Constance. He holds a PhD in this same subject from the Technical University Munich, and he had postdoc positions in Tokyo, Scotland, and Innsbruck. He's currently employed at the Volkswagen Data Lab, and he's working there as a senior quantum algorithm scientist. Welcome, Martin. And your presentation today is titled Beating Classical Heuristics for the Binary Paint Shop Problem with the QAOA. So for those in the audience who are already a bit wondering, QAOA is the abbreviation for the Quantum Approximate Optimization Algorithm, but I guess you're gonna tell this yourself to us in a moment. Welcome to our stage, Martin, and I hand over directly to you.
Yeah, thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me. I hope you can all hear and see me. Yeah, okay,
yes, we
perfect. So as already introduced, I'm going to talk a little bit about a quantum application that we identified and also investigated a little bit. And but first and foremost, I want to tell you a little bit about the thought process that led us to this specific application. So I need to okay. So now typically when you read a popular science article about quantum computing, you hear, okay, quantum computing can do everything. It can cure cancer, it can speed up the nitrogen fixation process, and of course, that is not true, even though the quantum computer might play a role in all of these things. And it really needs a lot of expertise to identify an application that is really amenable to a quantum speedup, because that in the end is what we are really aiming for, to solve a problem faster than we can with classical algorithms. And within this smaller group of problems that are really amenable to a speed up, there is another subdivision between an exponential and a polynomial speedup. And the paradigmatic example for an exponential speedup that everyone knows is Shor's algorithm and the factoring, the integer factoring problem. But if you aren't a Bond villain, that is not really a quantum application for you. And so if you are a serious businessman, you might be interested in a subroutine of the factoring algorithm, which is the quantum phase estimation. And you can use quantum phase estimation, for example, for quantum simulation. And that could help you to simulate a small molecule that is part of a medicine, or simulate a catalyst that is necessary for nitrogen fixation. Or you can, in some circumstances, even speed up linear algebra. And that opens a whole range of applications. So starting from machine learning to solving partial differential equations. And apart from that, you also have this polynomial speedup. And the paradigmatic example here is searching for a marked element in an unordered database. And typically when I tell people that, so they ask me, so why would I want to search through an unordered database? I'm building up this database in an ordered fashion to not search through an unordered database. And typically the application thought of here is in the following way. So think of a combinatorial optimization problem, for example, the Turing-Salesman problem, and you will build up this database of all possible routes this Turing-Salesman can actually take. and you're interested in finding the shortest one. That would be something you can directly map to a Grover search algorithm. And the problem, however, again, is that you only have this polynomial speedup. And this polynomial speedup actually applies only to the Grover search algorithm is kind of a meta algorithm. So it assumes that you can access the unordered database efficiently. And in this step, how to really access the database, there can be a polynomial overhead hidden, which is eating away your actually polynomial speedup. So what you really need to aim for in this NISQ era, and also in this era where we have fully error-corrected quantum computing, but very small quantum computers, is you would be heading for an exponential speedup. So what if, as VW, you are interested anyway in combinatorial optimization problems? And the thing where we hope to find super polynomial or even exponential speedup is if you're actually not interested in the optimal solution, as in the Grover search case, but in a good approximation. So, and that is more of like an industrial use case. So you would, you already have some good solution that you get from a classical fast heuristic, and you want to improve on that. So you want to see if you can find a faster solution, a cheaper solution, or a solution that just gives you happier customers. And then you look, okay, how much is the difference, and does this difference justify paying the premium on really running a quantum algorithm instead of a classic algorithm? And that is basically what we are interested in. Really looking at approximating combinatorial optimization problems. So far for the quantum application. So now, if you have found an application, you need to identify an algorithm. And the guiding principle for us is really the capabilities of current state-of-the-art hardware. And we are, as you heard, in this noisy intermediate scale era where we have quantum computers that have qubits that are error prone. So they have some characteristic time T1 where they completely lose their information, and they have another time scale, which is T2, where they somehow lose their quantumness. And whichever time is smaller, within this time window, we really need to execute the entire program. So what we are searching for is a constant time algorithm, because these are the ones we can really run on state-of-the-art hardware. And by constant time, I have to be a little bit more specific. So typically we think, or normal problems, we assume that if I increase the size of the problem, also your runtime will be longer. Yeah, but we cannot use algorithms on a state-of-the-art quantum computer to solve this kind of problems. We really have to execute a program that is constant time and does not depend on the system size. And so these types of algorithms, so typically one uses hybrid quantum classical heuristics for that. And these are algorithms that are a little bit set up like a neural network. So you have a couple of parameterized gates, and you execute these gates and you get some result. And you have some function that somehow finds out the quality of these results. And you adjust the parameters such that the quality of the results improves. And because of this heuristic classical quantum scheme, you typically don't have any performance guarantees. And that is a problem. So as I'm going to show you later on, if you really execute something on a QPU today, you will get results that are in some way underwhelming. And you need to have some assurance that what you're doing currently will lead you to a result that is better than classical for future generations. And for that, we actually need something like a speed up proof. And I'm going to show you to what extent we were actually able to find that with the binary paint job problem. So what is this binary paint job problem? So first of all, think of a paint job in a factory, and the task is to paint cars that are given in a sequence that is, for all intents and purposes, random, and you cannot change this sequence. But you know that within this sequence, there are pairs of cars, always pairs of cars. So in this sequence, for example, we have 2 Porsches, 2 Golfs, 2 Bullies, and 2 Beetles, even though we don't produce them anymore. And if you stopped really, if you paint all these cars, in the end, you need to have, for every pair, one of these cars needs to be red and the other one needs to be blue. And the thing you can actually decide is when the first car of a pair enters the paint job, you can decide what color to use to paint this car. If the second car arrives, you have to paint the other color. And now what you need to optimize is the number of color changes while painting this exact sequence of cars in the given form. And so why do you need to optimize the color changes? So typically we have one set of painting robots in these factories, and a color change would mean you have to flush out the old color, you have to clean the nozzles, you have to flush a new color, and well, this wastes paint, this pollutes water and takes time. So in the end, that all costs money, and we want to optimize the number of colors. And so this is just one paint sequence that is possible, and you can already see this is the optimal one because it only has one color. Now, by now, I hopefully have convinced you that be interested in that problem, because it's really central to our operation, and in almost exactly this version appears in our and so why are we as quantum algorithm designers interested in that? So the interesting thing about that problem is actually NP hard. So it belongs to this class of problems where also the traveling salesman is, and job shop scheduling and bin packing. And now that basically means you cannot solve it to exhaustion with a classic algorithm. But as I told you before, that is also very unlikely to happen with a quantum algorithm, because you only have this polynomial speedup. But if you're interested in approximation to the problem, you might be more successful. And from that perspective, this problem is also interesting because it's APX hard. That means it's difficult to even approximate, to come up with a good approximation for that problem. Now, for this problem, there exists a couple of heuristics. So algorithms that are simple and are specifically constructed for this problem. And the first and most simple algorithm for that would be the red first. So you just start painting these cars, and every time you encounter a car that is the first of its pair, you just paint it red. And when the second car comes, you paint it blue. And you can, because this algorithm is very simple, you can prove an average performance for that, and that would be 2 color changes every third car. You can get a little bit more sophisticated than that, and that would be the greedy algorithm. And then you just start with 1 color and you change when necessary. That means you change when there is a second car of a pair, and you change only if you haven't changed already. And you can again prove that with that technique, you get 1 color change every second car. And you can think of a more complicated version. I'm not going into detail how this works, and this would be the greedy recursive. And with this, you can actually show that you have 2 color changes every 5th car. And now with QAOA, the quantum approximate optimization algorithm, we can show that we can provide on average better performance in constant time. And that is remarkable because all these algorithms that I showed you before have a runtime that is growing with the system size. And you can beat all of them with a constant time quantum algorithm that has not been specifically developed for this problem. And okay, so how do we do it? I will spare you the technical details, but if you are interested, please contact me after this talk. So the steps that you have to go through is, first you have to map this problem to a spin glass problem, and then you can solve this spin glass problem with a quantum approximate optimization algorithm. And the quantum approximate optimization algorithm is basically a spectroscopic version of quantum annealing. And spectroscopic would mean you divide the time it takes for quantum annealing into steps. And there are different versions of QAOA depending on the number of steps. So there's basically a p=1, that means a one-step QAOA algorithm, a p=2, a two-step QAOA algorithm. And the more steps you have, the better your result should be. This is one of these algorithms, as I mentioned earlier, of this hybrid quantum classical flavor. So you have these parameters, which are basically the length of these time steps, and you adjust the time steps such that the results are better. And in our case, that would be the measure for the quality of the results would be the average number of color changes that you get. And you optimize for that. And actually in prior work, and also I'm going to spare to you the details here, please contact me afterwards, we showed that you can reformulate that problem specifically for the binary paint job such that you get rid of this outer optimization loop, so this classical part. And that is also very important to know because that speeds up this algorithm considerably. And now here we see the results of that. So we what we do here is we generate random instances of these binary paint job problems. That means we generate random sequences of cars, and we develop this QAOA circuit for that. We simulate, or we actually calculate the average performance of QAOA in that case and plot it here as a function of the number of cars. And you can see the average number of color changes grows linearly with the number of cars. And the slope of this linear graph actually depends on the number of time steps we take for the QAOA. And it gets better and better the more steps we take. And if you look at this inset, you can see that we can actually beat, for example, the greedy algorithm with a QAOA algorithm that has 4 of these time steps. And we can actually extend this calculation to an infinite size problem. So we can actually extract analytically the performance in the infinite size limit for QAOA. And with that, we can show that p=1, so the one-step QAOA algorithm can beat random guessing, which is the minimum thing it should do. And with p=2, you can beat the red first, as I introduced before. With the p=4, you can beat the greedy algorithm. At p=7, you can even beat this recursive greedy algorithm. And that, again, to emphasize, that means you can beat classic algorithms with polynomial time with a constant time quantum algorithm. And these constant time quantum algorithms should be really executable on day-to-day on this current state QPUs. And we did actually another thing. So we did some experiments on an IonQ quantum computer. And so again, we build random instances, we execute them on a QPU, and we compare actually the performance of this QPU to a noiseless QPU that we can simulate because the systems are small enough. And with here, you can, in this plot, you can actually see that starting from 2 to 8 cars, you get some results from the QPU, but from 9 to 11, you basically get results that are not discernible from random guessing. And that is the basic message that I said. So current state hardware gives you not underwhelming results, and you really need to be sure that the future generations will give you some speed up. So with that, I would like to conclude and await your questions.
Thank you so much, Martin. Very interesting, very application oriented, very illustrative. I think everyone can understand here why this approach is useful. Also, I, as a physicist myself, always enjoy seeing origin plotted graphs in presentations. I think we don't have much time for questions. There's one question I can see from the audience, so let me just read this out to you. Not knowing much about QAOA, my question is, can you give some intuitive insight into why the length of the quantum algorithm does not change when the problem size increases? Is the number of used qubits also constant?
Okay, so the number of used qubits is not constant. The number of used qubits actually grows with the system size. So every car you have, every pair of car actually you have in the sequence corresponds to 1 qubit. So the size of the QPU has to grow, but not this coherence time and not also not the decay time. That is kind of the central message here. To give some intuition why this works, that is very difficult. So we just so the number of steps is just fixed, and we can calculate the performance for that, and we found out it does that. Some intuition? No, I don't have any intuition why this should work.
That's fine. Thank you very much anyway for the answer. If you have more questions, I mean, you as the audience here, feel free to join Martin for the next 15 minutes in the speaker's corner. Once again, thank you very much, and we head directly on to our next presentation. We have two speakers once again for the next presentation. The first speaker is Walter Graf. He's the Smart Factory Industry 4.0 evangelist and Fujitsu Distinguished Engineer in Manufacturing and Automotive at Fujitsu. He also represents Fujitsu in the Bitkom working groups on Industry 4.0. Our second speaker is Søren Wilmsmeyer. He studied industrial engineering, and since March 2016 he is working as a research associate at the Institute of Production Engineering and Machine Tools at Leibniz University, Hanover, where he heads the Department of Production Planning and Control since 2019. Your talk is titled Quantum Technology in Flexible Job Shop Scheduling, a field report using digital annealer. I'm looking forward to the talk and hand hereby the stage over to you. Welcome to stage, Bob.
Yeah, thank you very much for introducing us to today's presentation. I would like to change the title a little bit to have a more motivating one, and I would like to use the one "A Taste of Quantum Already Today." I think because that's the key message that Søren and I would like to bring across with a very practical example we are having. When you're looking at quantum algorithms today, I think they live between two poles. One pole is certainly a very rudimentary world where you have rudimentary algorithms that typically run on today's quantum architectures already, but they have very limited practical value. They are more of scientific interest, I believe. And on the other hand, you have very complex algorithms that are much more practical from that sense, but they are not able to run on current quantum architectures. And I think this is exactly this area of tension where we live today. And this is exactly where we were using at Fujitsu with one new technology called the digital annealer, which is some sort of quantum inspired optimization, or you could also say this is already delivering a taste of quantum today. I have to be very honest with you, this is not a quantum computer. It's still a classical architecture, but it is actually moving the boundary to what we would normally consider to be only addressable by a quantum architecture. And to illustrate this a little bit more, we have chosen an example from the area of flexible job shop scheduling as a real world example. And in this real world example, And for those of you who are not ultimately familiar with manufacturing, I would like to illustrate this in a very brief example. So consider for a moment that you have a manufacturing company that is operating in its production environment with 3 machine tools, for instance, and they are producing goods. And so, for example, there is a red product they are producing, and they start to execute on machine 0. Then they process the resulting product on machine 1 and eventually on machine 2. And they do this for the green product, they do this for the blue product, and they do this for the yellow product. And as you can see, here we have now already got to an optimum solution where we have the highest possible utilization of the machinery and the shortest production time here for those four products. But in real world, as you can easily imagine, you're living in a much more complex environment. You're living in an environment where you have combinatorial problems, and this is a combinatorial problem, and the number of potential combinations is far beyond typically 10 to the power of 100, and it goes without saying that this is not possible to simply try out each and every solution to find the best one, the optimum solution, so to speak. And this is exactly where quantum architecture currently is giving some hope, and particularly I'm talking here about the quantum annealer here, where you would first of all map a map a problem to a quantum environment. For instance, a production plan would be mapped to a fingerprint. So the fingerprint itself would then identify exactly the production plan, and the fingerprint would be represented in the quantum world by a set of quantum bits here. So the set of quantum bit uniquely identifies the production plan in this game. And the quantum annealer then is preparing a physical environment. I'm not going into details here, but the physical environment is basically putting these qubit states in an energy environment, so to speak. And the solution to the problem is represented basically by the ground state. And this is now the art of the quantum annealer, to be able to reach that ground state and to exactly prepare the physical environment in such a way that the solution is exactly depicted by the ground state. But we all know that current quantum architectures have their shortcomings that I'm not referring here. But the question now is whether it would be possible to think hard about a classical solution where you could somehow replace or compensate the quantum intuition that I just mentioned on the slide before with a massively parallel architecture that is implemented in a single chip. And that is basically, and I know it's a little bit in a very short version depicted here, but it's in the end, it's basically a massively parallel implementation of that algorithm. And that means that you become suddenly 10,000 times faster in the finding of the solution. And to illustrate this a little bit furthermore, you can consider yourself a problem that would normally take 166 hours on an ordinary computer to complete. This is now finished in just 60 seconds. And when you look yourself at a production environment, that you can easily understand that the 60 seconds is something that everybody would invest in a planning environment, while 166 hours is absolutely out of reach. And now I would like to hand over to Søren to explain a little bit more in detail about the environment that we have tested in that sense.
Yes, thanks, Walter, for this brief introduction into the world of digital annealing, or as you said, the taste of quantum. I'm happy to now give you some insights into the use case setup and the results within our practical example. The production of the tape dispenser you see on the right-hand side was our use case. And yeah, you can normally configure it differently, and you can also add individual engraving. And this, as a result, makes each configuration unique, and each of these configurations is planned and produced more or less only once. And as a result, this means that we have more or less a perfect example of modern lot size 1 production. Within our use case, 40 jobs are produced by performing 4 operations on a total of 6 machines. Not all of the 4 operations can be done on each of the machines, but still for 2 operations, we have machines in parallel. With respect to job shop scheduling, 2 decisions now have to be made, and I think Walter already mentioned them. It's what machine should be used and in which sequence should we produce the different jobs. And you can see this is more or less a very simple setting, but there are already more than 10 squares, 287 different schedules to choose from. And this is what makes flexible job shop scheduling to one of the most difficult optimization problems in the context of production. Unfortunately, the answer to this complex problem is still often sought on the basis of the simplest production scheduling approaches. Rule-based approaches, for example, are still widespread, but very rigid. Therefore, manufacturing execution systems with more or less complex and/or AI-based optimization algorithms become more and more common, but these are still not in place everywhere. They allow for more dynamic and adaptive reactions in case of unplanned deviations from the schedule in near future. So let's say in case of a technical machine failure. But these optimizations are still not done process parallel. This is because process parallel decision-making normally still takes too long. And as a result, orders already in progress are rescheduled by the foreman on the shop floor based on his or her experience, and this can be more or less optimal. Yeah, and this is why we think that quantum-based algorithms are still used as they are still used within the digital annealer, can bring scheduling to the next level. To underline this, I show you the benchmarking results of our tape dispenser use case, which we generated last year on this slide. The bars in this diagram show the needed total production time for our 40 jobs. So this is not the calculation time you see here, but it is the production time for the 40 jobs. And within only 12 to 13 seconds, the digital annealer found a schedule that produces our 40 tape dispenser jobs 40% faster than classical rule-based scheduling. Even the coupling of rule-based job sequencing and ML-based machine allocation in an MES brings out 18% higher production times. So, and with those results, I turn the floor back over to Walter for the conclusion of our talk.
Yeah. So I think there are 2 aspects that we can look at. First of all, there is the aspect to compare the digital annealer with other classical methods, because we're still living in a classical world that I have to admit here. But we can constitute already that we have been able to calculate the whole problem in a much faster time. And even more important, we're getting even much better results in the end. And compared to other methods, and we were running a number of benchmarks with other algorithms as well, we also found out that there is a higher scalability in the problem formulation, in this QUBO formulation that we can do. And when you look at an end user perspective at the total problem size, we also getting a higher flexibility. And this is something I would like to illustrate on the next slide. So far, you can see that we have optimized the throughput in the whole environment. But when you look at today's production environments, this is only one aspect that could be of interest. In fact, very often companies are more interested in things like delivery reliability in the end, because that has an economic impact they are seeing. And also they need the flexibility in order to change product schedules on a last minute basis, because they're getting last minute orders that are of high priority and so on and so forth. And also they would like to deal with production outages where, let's say, you have machine failures and you have somehow to recalculate your production schedule based on degraded environment, for example. And this gives you the necessary flexibility, and you see that the time and the performance plays a very important role on that behalf on the application level, and where you see how important it is to really become better in these area. When you compare, however, the digital annealer with a real quantum solution, which is of course not ultimately available today, I have to admit here that we are not striving to actually substitute the quantum computing here with a classical approach. So this should not be the message, because first of all, it is quite apparent that this digital annealer approach is quite good for combinatorial problems, particularly the ones where a near optimum solution is still sufficient, because this is the biggest shortcoming that you have with this semi-classical architecture. I would say that you have no guarantee that you're getting the absolute optimum. And this is a promise that, of course, is kept by the quantum annealer. However, the quantum annealer is not yet there where it should be. But it could be applied then also to different problem classes where we absolutely depend on the absolute optimum, where the digital annealer would certainly not be suited. So this is, I think, quite important to notice when we compare the two approaches. To sum it up here near the end, I can say the digital annealer is actually moving the boundary of what you would typically consider the quantum advantage. We are not yet there with exponential speedups and so on and so forth, but you see that from a very practical point of view, we have been able to move the boundary based on a quantum algorithm. You can easily execute every algorithm that was developed on the annealer on a later available quantum annealer that is carrying enough qubits around. And we have shown that there is really a proven relevance for a very practical application in the manufacturing industry of job shop scheduling. And with this, I would like to conclude the presentation, because I think the main benefit we are seeing here from the Quantum Summit point of view is that it should really whet the appetite for the real quantum advantage, because what I also sense from the very early presenters we had today, I think the biggest challenge still is to engage the industry with the still very new and basic quantum technology. And I think this is exactly the way to go here to attract more people to invest in the real quantum world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you. Another very inspiring talk, and I think illustrating very nicely, very well, just how much time you can save with those approaches. I mean, even if you're not using the real quantum annealer yet, but you use this step in between, so to say, the digital annealing approach, even there you can already be so much faster than classical approaches. Now you have kind of you've kind of moved alongside this line already, but let me ask again, do you have, like, for certain problems, for certain applications or use cases already made, like, calculations? Okay, how much time you can save to the classical approach with the digital annealer, but how much, what a factor will it be to actual quantum annealing in the future when this will be available?
Oh, I think that there are several questions inside your single question. So first of all, we have done some investigations. I think there was this other talk about the Deutsche Bahn, the scheduling optimization thing that Christian Münch and his colleague from Deutsche Bahn was actually talking about. I think that was a second interesting example. I think that the challenge with the digital annealer or with running projects with it still is that you can not really give any firm prediction of the savings already. You simply have to try it out. And this is the reason why we have also invested some time in having very quick proof of concepts available, where you can compare the existing results that you got with certain solutions and compare that with the digital annealer, get a very quick outcome, whether it's feasible to invest there in this near optimum case, so to speak. But what remains unknown is exactly where is the absolute optimum and how much speed would you gain, or how much benefit would you gain when you could calculate the same problem with a quantum annealer. But I think it's worthwhile going that direction.
Okay, we already got a comment here in the section which also goes into that direction, that you put a lot of other examples with different customers and industry on your booth. Let me use this chance then, apart from thanking you once again for this wonderful talk, and sending you off to the speakers corner now. So anyone who is interested in further discussions, please engage with Walter and Søren in the speakers corner. Let me use this chance to also point out to you that we have the partner area in our platform, so you can engage directly with the partners of Quantum Summit. That is, for example, Fujitsu, that's also IQM, that's Atos, that's also the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, the Fraunhofer Society. So you can directly get in contact with them and check out, for example, their use cases. Let us head over to the next talk then. Our next talk has again 2 speakers. So I welcome our next speakers. They are Jörg Lessig is the first speaker. Jörg Lessig is a professor for enterprise application development. He has graduate degrees in computer science and computational physics. He holds a PhD in computer science. He has had research and postdoc positions in Stanford and Berkeley and Lugano. And he is the founder and CEO of the INM Institute for Sustainability Management. So welcome, Jörg. The second speaker is Maximilian Selch. Maximilian, he studied mathematics at the Dresden University of Technology, and he joined the Fraunhofer Institute for Machine Tools and Forming Technology, IWU, in 2020, where he leads the Institute's quantum computing project. So welcome, Maximilian, as well. We are looking forward to your joint talk on the topic of quantum Bayesian networks for path accuracy in manufacturing. The stage is directly yours. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much for the nice introduction, and yeah, welcome also from my side. I'm very happy that we can present here about quantum Bayesian networks for path accuracy in manufacturing. And it's first me giving a broader view about our QApp Center mainly, which is the umbrella for different institutes working on quantum computing topics. And then I will hand over to Maximilian. So here on top, you see different application fields: production energy, integrated circuits, knowledge engineering, which are important for us at the QApp Center for Applied Quantum Computing Saxony, which is kind of the central initiative in Saxony with the focus applied quantum computing. Can we go back for a moment, please? I just want to quickly say also a few words about our institute. So here in the talk, we have IWU in Dresden, which is a main institution in efficient production, intelligent manufacturing, cognitive manufacturing. And we at the IOSD AST are more on the energy and water infrastructure side. Cybersecurity is an important topic, and of course, quantum computing. Yes, so let's now get a bit into the details. And the QApp Center can be seen as in 2 sides. One side is the focus on industrial applications, and there the clear goal is that quantum computing should become a game changer in different relevant applications in the different industries. We are going to implement pilot applications, detect the problems that can be addressed with quantum computing. And in order to do this, of course, we need the research and education side, where the goal is to educate the persons who can work in that field, and to implement also the research in more foundational quantum computing. So I think now we can look quickly at two focus fields, and the second will be then already relevant for the more technical part of the talk here given by Maximilian. So this focus field, energy systems, is more covered by the Fraunhofer IOSB. It's about energy markets, energy management systems, and you see the scenario on the left side, the energy market with different entities, combined heat and power, heat pumps, car sharing. And on the right side, you see different directions where you need also computational power, settlement of the transactions in energy management, for instance, learning in the energy management system, and also planning tools for districts and dimensioning of districts, for instance. And of course, it is of great value to have here quantum computing to solve hard problems. Maybe we come now to the second focus area, which is about this digital twin scenario, focus on manufacturing. And if you look at this scenario, you see different manufacturing steps, and you see that there's measurements in between, data which is coming in, and there may be uncertainties also in those measurements or measured uncertainties on the parts. And then you want to react to this. You want to react already in the next processing step. And of course, that's also welcome to have effective computational models and algorithms in this digital twin scenario. You can do some data aggregation simulation in between. And in the end, you can handle this manufacturing process in a way that you have in the end more good parts and have, for instance, improved modeling accuracy for simulations in between to be here more effective. So in this digital twin scenario brings us directly to our technical part of the talk, and Maximilian Selch will discuss now quantum Bayesian networks in this or in one specific digital twin scenario. So Maximilian, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Jörg. And now we come to the topic of path accuracy in manufacturing. And as an exemplary manufacturing process, we deal with a 3-axis milling operation and see an item traverses a chain of various production steps, which consists of different milling and drilling operations. And the aim of each single process step is to perform an ideal processing, which is specified by a certain target geometry. And on the one hand, we have the fact that each mechanical process can cause deviations individually. And on the other hand, there are also cumulative effects. But here we want to focus on the effects of the individual process steps and want to find out the strength of influence single factors have on the quality of the manufacturing process. And this provides the basis to do a quality analysis of the holistic process later on, which is our long-term goal dealing with this manufacturing application. So of course, there are various approaches to tackle this task. And for various reasons, we decided to work with Bayesian networks to model the fundamentals of the underlying process and to estimate the strength of influences. So Bayesian networks have basically some nice advantages, such as the possibility to learn on a limited basis of information, to also work with incomplete data, and we can weight the certainty of our statements. So first, I'm going to briefly introduce how Bayesian networks help us in, so to say, the classical or conventional way, and then we discuss the basics of how to do this the quantum way and the potential advantages quantum technologies can provide for our application. So here we have three essential parts. The first one is the network's graph structure, showing the influence factors and the dependencies between them. So here we have an extract of our Bayesian networks to model the physics of the milling process. And we see here, for example, some jerks corresponding to certain axes. We have cutting forces, we have deviations, and we have, for example, the workload of the spindle. And these nodes within the network are equipped with some parameters. So we can consider in a very simple binary case, for example, a certain variable corresponds to hold a given tolerance threshold or even not. And the dependencies between the influence factors can be modeled with conditional probabilities, which are stored in these conditional probability tables. And these parameters can be trained using machining data. And for this purpose, we use the data from a digital twin of the milling process to apply such parameter learning algorithms. And the last part is about the estimation of the strength of influences. And we use the learned parameters to do the analysis of strength of influences by considering the changes in the probabilities of the dependent node when setting evidence to the influencing factor. This basically means we fit the value of a parent node to certain fixed status and watch at the differences in the probability distributions and construct a score based on a weighted sum method. So what about quantum computing to use in this application? We have especially in the context of proceeding inference, which we need to estimate the strength of influence scores. This requires a very high computational effort in Bayesian networks with a large number of nodes. And the two main characteristics of the qubits, such as the superposition and entanglement, offer an opportunity of a very compact representation of Bayesian networks. And the technology of quantum computing therefore features a method to handle especially large-scale networks, as well as to consider multiple structuring approaches in parallel. And this way, we are basically tackling a probabilistic model, which the Bayesian networks are, with a probabilistic computing architecture. And the goal now is to create a quantum algorithm and a corresponding circuit to encode the network and estimate the strength of influence. So some notes to the first part, the encoding part. Here we use the superposition principle of the qubits to store the parameters in the qubits. We have the amplitudes in the superposition state correspond to the likelihood of measuring the appropriate basis states via rotation gate. We can encode the nodes parameters in the corresponding qubit, which is indicated here as the map to the table. And here we have to mention that we are using IBM superconducting quantum computers, which are underlying the gate-based quantum computing model. And the same principle applies not only for the simplest binary case, but also for registers of qubits when we need to encode more than two stages. then we need log n qubits to encode n different status of a variable. And to model the dependencies or the conditional probabilities, we need multi-controlled rotations which encode the parameters depending on the parent node's status. And now, the missing part is about the distance estimation. So we finally need a tool to measure changes in probability distributions. And here, the commonly used technique of the swap test comes to the rescue. The swap test states the certainty of two quantum states to be different and can therefore be used to determine the distance between quantum states, which include the node's probability distribution. If we measure the bottom qubit, we receive the distance estimator similar to the classical way, but here now by reading out the one state amplitude of the bottom qubit. And now I want to hand over back to Jörg for the concluding part. He will finish with some statements about potentials and advantages the quantum way can offer in this manufacturing application.
Yes, thank you very much, Max, for this technical presentation about Bayesian networks in the quantum realm. And now we want to have a look. So what does it bring? And you have seen, you code this probability information that you have, those probability tables that you have in Bayesian networks in form of qubits. And this is also known from other application cases that this can be quite efficient. And basically there's a logarithmic scaling. So you just need logarithmic number of qubits in the number of those entries in the table. So this is quite nice. So there's a memory advantage. Memory complexity is better. In the runtime complexity, unfortunately, you don't really see this because you have to encode the data. Max did explain this, how you do this with the different gates. And there may be actually the potential for further speed up. If you use amplitude amplification, you can go a step further and have this a bit more compact. And yeah, basically what we have done is a proof of concept at this point. And we want to go a bit further to look at larger setups and have a bit in-depth analysis about this. And of course, those speed-ups that I was talking about, we want to look at and want to implement. Let's again zoom out a bit further. So what we have seen in this example is, of course, what we want to have. And there are quite a few examples in the meantime where you have advantages either on the memory side or on the computational complexity side concerning runtime. And this is just a teaser for you. I don't go through those examples, but here you see that in many different technical applications, different algorithms, there's some speed up due to different reasons. The reasons are given here: amplification or the APHL algorithm, use of adiabatic quantum computing, or quantum RAM. And you see also a few citations where this is the case, for instance, for convolutional neural networks, different types of neural networks, support vector machines, and other applications. Okay, and this gives us basically our view, and that's what we want to further investigate. So thank you very much for your attention. And this here is actually a list of the 4 institutes, Fraunhofer institutes again, and the persons involved. So again, thank you very much. And I think we have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions. And if you want, also have a look at our brand new homepage.
Thank you so much to both of you for this interesting talk, in detail talk about about the algorithms here for improving the accuracy, the parse accuracy in manufacturing. I would be interested. So you have you're developing all those algorithms, those approaches. Are you actually testing them? Are you actually doing the experimental part too? Because I'm an experimental physicist by education, so I'm always interested in the experimental part. Are you testing them on quantum simulators? Are you testing them on actual quantum computers that are available for first tries already by some companies and also by Fraunhofer now in the development, so to say? Is this a thing, or are you completely concentrating on the algorithm development part, on the theoretical part?
So we did some tests for some exemplary little scale examples using the real IBM quantum computers. And with the ability of the Fraunhofer group to also get tickets for the whole pool of the IBM quantum computers, we have booked a ticket for the upcoming month. And there we have planned to do larger scale investigations. On the one hand, with the simulators just to check up the algorithms works, and then on the large scale real IBM quantum computers to see how this is today possible to implement on real quantum hardware.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much. Then our time is already over for this session. Well, let me see. There's one question just popping up just now. Is there a chance to map the problem to a quantum annealer? Maybe we have time for this one question here.
Difficult to answer. I think there is basically most of the problems you can solve on both types of machine. I would not immediately know how to do this because we have used specific gates, and we would have to look more deeply into this, I think, when there's a bit more time.
Okay, thank you very much. Of course, there's still the speaker's corner as with the others too. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes to the audience, feel free to engage our two speakers there. Thank you once again for your interesting presentation, and good luck with your further research on this. And we are heading to the next presentation on our stage, Bob, which is titled Large-Scale Hybrid Quantum Computing Solution for Linear Systems of Equations. And the speaker is Michael Perelstein. Michael is a quantum algorithms development project manager and team leader at Terra Quantum. And he's also an experimental quantum physicist at Aalto University and quantum algorithms developer at the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology. Now, I would, of course, be interested in how that works together. I guess you're not working at both locations physically, but I don't know if we have time for this to answer. So I'll just leave the floor to you. I'm looking forward to your interesting presentation, and thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for this kind introduction. So greetings from Helsinki. Actually, I'm here based in Helsinki at Aalto University. So yeah, I'm a quantum physicist and manager of quantum computing projects at Terra Quantum. And first of all, I would like to thank our organizers for this wonderful opportunity to present our recent results in a hybrid quantum algorithms development, and particularly the hybrid solution of linear systems of equation on a large scale. So the tantalizing promise of quantum computers is that they can do some specific tasks much faster than classical machines. And many experiments, for instance, various quantum supremacy experiments, prove that it is indeed the case. And quantum-based computation can potentially simplify the basic calculations necessary almost everywhere. And one of the most fundamental computational problems is the solution of the linear system of equations. And this problem arises in various subroutines in big data processing. For instance, some complex physical simulations can be performed, such as a heat transfer analysis or electromagnetic simulation or aerodynamics, and etc. However, classical methods that linearize the partial differential equations and solve the corresponding linear systems, they fall behind when analyzing highly complicated dynamics. Besides all that, we can analyze sophisticated time processes with the help of the quantum algorithms. And one of the advantages here that we actually do not need to measure the whole quantum state, and the whole analysis can be performed on the quantum machine. And this has application in financial services, machine analysis, for instance, in some anomaly detection, and etc. And also some quantum optimization can be performed in that way. And also, of course, linear algebra subroutines arise in machine learning, and the quantum algorithms for linear systems can significantly speed up various machine learning frameworks. So before going into the realization details, let me briefly present to you our general framework of the quantum algorithms. So here's a little bit of math. So we analyzed the quantum algorithm for linear system solution that is based on the quantum phase estimation procedure. So Haro, Hasdimi, and Lloyd firstly presented this in 2009. And the problem is formulated as follows. So the matrix A and the vector B are given, and the vector X should be found. And using then some simulation, we can encode the matrix into the quantum circuit as the quantum operator, and vector B could be encoded in the initial quantum state in the quantum amplitudes. And as the result of the algorithm, the vector, which is proportional to the solution, will be encoded in the same register as vector B. So in general, we can divide the quantum circuit, the full quantum circuit, on a gate-based quantum device into 3 parts. So ancillary qubit is required for a matrix inversion. Then phase qubits, they basically keep the eigenvalues of the matrix, and also register qubits. And the latter consist of the vector B at the beginning of the algorithm and the solution vector at the end of the algorithm. So in order to benchmark this algorithm, we consider a specific problem that in our view is suitable for current noisy intermediate scale quantum devices. So first of all, for this particular analysis, we omit this Hamiltonian simulation and the matrix encoding, and assume that this part is computationally easy for now, because it is indeed the case in many problems. And that gives us the tool of defining the linear system for a quantum circuit. And here we introduced 3 types of matrices. So the first one is implemented through a single qubit gates. So the quantum state is just a tensor product of a single qubit gates, and we call this TP1. The second type is more complicated. And basically here, it's a tensor product of 2 qubit gates. And we divide the circuit into clusters of entangled 2 qubit substates, and that's called TP2. And the latest one is the most complicated circuit where all qubits are entangled, so it is not actually a tensor product and TP. And one can consider these 3 types as basically an approximation of some Hermitian matrix with different level of accuracy. So TP1 is the roughest one, and NTP is the most accurate. And moreover, to simplify the quantum phase estimation procedure, we assume a fixed spectrum of the matrix. And once again, this is indeed the case in various, for instance, differential equations. So this assumption is actually not far from a real life problem, but it simplifies the quantum realization significantly. So for further simplification of the quantum circuit, we employ some methods for complexity reduction by simplifying the single qubit gates and also using hybrid approach. So the hybrid approach is particularly interesting. That allows us to reduce the number of phase qubits, so this second group of qubits. Since in the binary form, the last bit of all eigenvalues is actually 1 because of this fixed spectrum, we can consider this bit as a classical one and just eliminate it from the circuit. So before this trick, we had 3 phase qubits because there were 3 bits, but now we have only 2 phase qubits. And it sounds not as a significant improvement, but actually it is. So you can see the circuit before this improvement on the top, and there are a lot of control operations, control unitary operations, which are very complicated. And here we have just basically a single control unitary operation. So the reduction of the complexity is significant. And also on the right-hand side, you can see the improvement in circuit depth. And blue points here are for initial circuit for different matrix types, and red ones for the process one. And the problem that they solve is the same, but the this hybrid approach and simplification of the circuit allows us basically to reduce the circuit complexity. And in total, to solve that problem with n variables and n equations, we need just log n plus 3 qubits overall. So now we can move to the results of the implementation of this algorithm. So here you can see the very simple linear system that is given by the following matrix and following vector. And basically, we can solve it using pen and paper and show that the solution of this problem should be encoded in this quantum state. So for instance, if we have a fault-tolerant quantum device and we solve this following problem, we will get this quantum state. And for this task, we need just 4 qubits. So here you can see the density matrix of the quantum states obtained experimentally on IBM Open Quantum Superconducting Processor. And as you can see, these quantum states obtained are pretty close to the dashed one, which is the theoretical one. And the average fidelity with this way is about 50–60%. However, assuming that our processor can provide the solution with a high fidelity, we know that the eigenvector corresponding to the largest eigenvalue should be proportional to the solution. So it's just a little bit of classical post-processing after the solution. And utilizing this post-processing, we obtain the following solution of the Johannesburg quantum processor unit from IBM that coincides with the actual solution with 97.5% fidelity. So this is pretty high for current NISQ devices. However, for the large scale analysis, for the large scale solution, we can't get the whole quantum state anymore because it requires full state tomography whose complexity grows exponentially with the increase of the system size. So in order to characterize the fidelity of the solution, we perform the projection of the quantum state on the z-axis and extract the projection of the solution. And for instance, in different, let's say, electromagnetic simulation, we need to calculate some mean energies of the field. You basically do the same. You got the solution, and then you calculate these mean values. And we employ a similar cross-entropy benchmarking approach as in Google's quantum supremacy work to compare the projections of the quantum states. And we also average this value across random linear systems. So we have like a few hundreds of random linear systems here. And the fidelity of our algorithm as a function of the circuit width, so the size of the linear system, is presented on the right-hand side. For the high-performance simulator with an embedded noise model and the actual experiment conducted on IBM quantum devices. And we also plot here so-called digital error model that incorporates all uncorrelated errors in the quantum processor. So just the readout, single qubit and 2 qubit gates errors. And while the simulator with the noise model is in a good agreement with the digital error model, the real experiment data is actually vastly different. So the measured fidelity is almost independent on the matrix type, despite the significant changes in corresponding circuit. And it was actually confirmed earlier that the gate errors are correlated in some of the IBM machines. And this could be really the case in here. Nonetheless, we expect that some advanced equipment combined with the necessary precautions against these correlated errors, that's so-called like partial filters, will provide the fidelity behavior according to the digital error model. And what is interesting from this experimental result that we solved the large-scale linear system of the NTP type with a 0.04% fidelity. And this is a record-breaking result for a size of linear system that was solved on a real quantum hardware. So now if we compare the solution of the exact same problems of the solution of the linear system with limited fidelity, and we compare it with the supercomputers from the past, some very impressive and significant devices, we can see the noticeable quantum speed up. And our solution implemented on IBM hardware outperforms such computers as Atlas, Trace, SCSCI Red, and so on. But of course, it is still slower than the modern supercomputers, which is not a surprise. However, in the processing of the 50 qubit problem, because here we employed only 20 qubits, but when we consider 50 qubit problem, it will be impossible for classical devices to keep up. And such a dramatic increase in speed is just an experimental evidence that the hybrid quantum computing, so the proper quantum algorithms, will surpass the classical computing industry that ran in the 20th century. So in general, a purely classical solution of this problem with such advanced methods as Casimir subspace method or conjugate gradients and so on, cannot tackle this problem faster than in n² time. And despite all the simplification that we made with the fixed spectrum, like block structures and so on the other hand, the algorithm implemented on a fault-tolerant machine provides, of course, exponential speed up, and it's far more efficient than GPU or CPU. And the scaling is logarithmic where n is the size of the system or the dimension of the problem that you're solving. And however, since we live in the NISQ era and we for now don't have these machines, the quantum-inspired solution, which is basically the circuit emulation on a high-performance device, looks very promising, providing polynomial speed up if you compare with the just pure classical solution. And for instance, if we compare the abstract 100K core supercomputer that realizes the quantum simulations and superconducting quantum processor unit, we find that the quantum approach, of course, outperforms classical computer sets something about 50 qubits or a bit more. However, for that comparison, we employ general Schrödinger simulation, which is just the straightforward simulation that includes matrix multiplication. And we know that more advanced quantum simulation approaches, such as tensor networks, allows for a solution in a polylogarithmic time. And this kind of quantum-inspired solution would show the power of quantum algorithms even more vastly, demonstrating the algorithmic quantum advantage. And in order to implement our solution and leverage the full power of a high-performance computing, we established the hybrid quantum computing platform. It's called QMware. And the service and software are powered by a high-performance multi-node hardware that can virtualize up to 40 qubits. And these are virtualized qubits in there without noise, so this is basically a fault-tolerant machine. And what is amazing, any application built on a QMware hybrid quantum cloud with virtualized qubit will also run on upcoming native quantum processor. So you can just take out this simulator and place here a quantum processor unit, and it will work as it worked before. So we provide all layers starting from the hardware, both classical and quantum interface, low-level software, high-level software, and also application layers that we now are working on. So we also provide an efficient connection between the quantum processor unit and the classical subrouters, which is crucial for successful implementation of the hybrid algorithms, and not only linear solvers, but many variational algorithms. And our nodes have a large amount of RAM that is highly important for the hybrid quantum data processing. And using the full potential of our RAM, we can solve 137 billion equations with 137 billion variables. And it is far beyond the capabilities of a pure classical machine and classical algorithms. So the QMware was established to make this smooth transition from classical computing to a hybrid quantum computing. And that transition is just unavoidable in the future. And the main idea behind hybrid quantum computing is utilizing classical resources to find a problem's hardcore and delegate this hardcore to the quantum processor, or vice versa, taking quantum algorithm whose bottlenecks would be eliminated by classical improvement, as I showed you with this algorithm for linear solvers, because the circuit at the beginning was very complicated, but we simplified this with the classical embeddings. And QMware anticipates that both these approaches, classical to quantum and quantum to classical, lead to disruptive applications in the most demanding computational problems. And these problems in financial services, such as discrete optimizations or modeling, in engineering, such as solving partial differential equations, and basically reducing them to linear systems of equations. And also logistic, medical, and energy technologies, such as various quantum machine learning models. And that brings me to the end of my talk. So I presented our recent results on the hybrid quantum algorithms for linear system that was implemented on a noisy intermediate scale hardware from IBM, and also high performance simulator QMware. And the experimentally implemented quantum solution of this 130,000 dimension problem is a record for linear system solution on a quantum computer, and it demonstrates the algorithmic quantum advantage over classical approaches. And beside this, realization is an excellent benchmarking for a quantum hardware to investigate the correlation in errors and overall performance in these quantum phase estimation-based algorithms. So our future plans and our current work aims at efficient data encoding, so we can process larger classes of matrices. And also now we put a lot of effort into the investigation of the differential equations for physical and biological simulation based on the linear system solver. And right now we're working on the implementation of these quantum-inspired solutions on our QMBER machine. So thank you very much for your attention. If you're interested in details of our work, you can check the archive preprint on the linear system solver and also our QMBER website for more use cases. And now I'm happy to answer your question.
Thank you so much, Michael, for this very interesting and inspiring talk. It's always impressive to me to see those achievements that you've already made there, both on the real quantum computer that you've worked on, as well as for your hybrid approaches. And I have a feeling that this hybrid approach of really trying to combine the possibilities of quantum computers, even early quantum computers today, with classical computing approaches, and getting the best of both worlds is a way to go for the next coming years for a lot of the early quantum computing that we will see. As with the other speakers, Michael will be available for you for the next 15 minutes in the speaker's corner. So if you have further questions or would like to engage in discussion with him, please feel free to approach him directly in the Meet the Speakers room. We here on Stage Bob are going into a short break, a short coffee break of about 10 minutes. And you can use the time to just get a coffee or do other things, just relax your legs maybe after a few hours by now. But we will be back in 10 minutes. We are also using this time to show you a video. If you got your coffee and would like to watch a video of our upcoming events at Bitkom, we are hosting, of course, not only this Quantum Summit, but a lot of other very interesting formats. There's more of those interesting events coming up this year, and you will learn about them in this video in the next 10 minutes. We will see each other again here at about 5 p.m. or exactly 5 p.m. actually, with the next 3 talks then. See you in about 9 minutes by now. Welcome back to Stage Bob at our Quantum Summit. We continue here with 3 more interesting talks, and I would like to encourage you once again to engage in discussions and questions already in the live discussion, in the live chat, so that if there is time at the end of the talk, we can already address the questions maybe. Otherwise, of course, there's always time afterwards to go to the speaker's corner and ask your questions there, but it's still nice to already have a discussion going here. So I am happy to welcome our first speaker of this last block, so to say, of the Stage Bob here. And his name is Christian Tuchku. He's a theoretical solid-state physicist, and he completed his PhD just this year, I see. So congratulations, Christian. He's a quantum software engineer at the Fraunhofer Institute for Industrial Engineering, IAO, in Stuttgart. And he's engineering use case-based quantum algorithms. The talk he's gonna give us and he's gonna hold is called Schrödinger's Cat in Industry, Real-Life Quantum Software Engineering. So that already sounds very enticing and interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Welcome, Christian, and the stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this great introduction. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's a pleasure to present to you how Schrödinger's cat can be applied, or at least is life and death at the same time in industry. Yeah. So the outline of this talk goes like, we will take a short introduction to the physics of quantum computers. I mean, you're mostly aware of this, I guess, since we are in the very end of the session already. But then we will focus a bit on the IBM quantum system in Eningen, where we as a Fraunhofer have an administration for this. Then after that, I will briefly present you our, or not briefly, but show you our, what are we doing at the Fraunhofer IAO in Stuttgart, and what are we doing in the scope of the Sequoia research project and the Kompetenzzentrum, which is at the same time presented, I think, so the Kompetenzzentrum itself as a project on Stage Alice. So who's interested in quantum computing will be one of the questions this talk should clarify, as well as what are criteria for potential use cases nowadays. When is a use case which can be at least tackled by current quantum computers or near-term quantum computers? What are timescales which we're where can we expect quantum computers really where do they enter the industry, at least in the next few years? And then in the end, we will come to recommendations for companies. What can we do now to be at least prepared for the quantum revolution, which is expected to appear tomorrow? So let's start with a short introduction to the physics of quantum computers. As the talk already states, we start with Schrödinger's cat. Schrödinger's cat is dead and alive at the same time, meaning if we do not look at the box where the cat is placed in, we don't know if it is dead after a certain time when a radioactive substance decayed, right? So, and this is all you need to know, at least from the theoretical solid-state physics, if you want to understand quantum computation, because it's in both states at the same time. That means usually, or if you have a combinatorial problem, then you can think about, if you want to solve it, you need to go each of the branches of this decision tree at a time. But if you have a system which is in so-called superposition, where all the possible inputs can be realized at the same time, you can process the whole tree at once and operate in all states simultaneously. So this is what's quantum computing about, but this does not help much because if you open the box, if you measure your system, you measure only one state as in a classical computer. So you need to be very clever as a quantum software engineer to find the right, what we call interference pattern, to find an operation which distills you in the end the state which you're aiming for. So that's how we need to build circuits and quantum algorithms. And you can use not only superposition, but also entanglement, meaning if you have a certain state which consists of 2 qubits here, they are more or less like, you can entangle them via, so for example, C0 gates. That means that if you measure position 1, you also measure position qubit 2, due to the fact that you cannot measure one without changing the other one, what's called entanglement, and therefore you can study highly dependent systems. So the current players on the market, at least from the hardware side, are listed here. So not all, but the most important players, say in the superconducting architectures, we are mostly aware of this, things which need to be which are very cold, which will be accessed to a cloud-based, because they need helium. For example, IBM or Rigetti are two representatives. But trapped ions are also very important nowadays, as they predict a quantum volume of already 4 million. And maybe these ones, they do not rely so much on the cooling. And not only quantum computations that are gate-based are important, also quantum annealing has currently much more qubits. It's not universal, but in a sense, it's also very powerful and can be used currently already in industry, as we will see in a moment. And so to come to the system, which is annealing the system, IBM Q system, it's just started, was available this year in January. We are, as a Fraunhofer, there an administrator. You can get also tickets if you want to work without Q, say, and for a commercial access here. You can get tickets over the Fraunhofer. And so this one has an amount of 27 qubits. Beware, that is a number we will need later in the end. But this is not much, at least, but this is the state of the art of IBM. So it has this competitive quantum volume of 32, which is, say, the state of the art of the IBM hardware these days. And if you look at the decoherence time, so that's the time how long a qubit can save the information, more or less, and the gate time, how long you need to operate at a certain quantum operation, you see that, say, that the amount of operations you can do before you lose the information perfectly would be around 200. So that's not that deep. So you need to improve these decoherence times. That's why we're in the disk era. But it's not only about the decoherence, also the gates have errors. So they are, say, in the close to percentage, but in a sub-percentage area. But still, you're restricted nowadays to the NISQ, noisy intermediate scale quantum computing era. That means you need to make short quantum circuits and embed them usually in classical systems. That's what we call hybrid quantum computation. And also, if you want to program algorithms, you need to be aware of the coupling map. So you cannot simply couple every qubit with every qubit due to the hardware. So we are programming very close to the hardware to also take into account the actual structure, more or less. And for example, you see here a short experience from the Eniga backend. So we try to solve the Sudoku problem, which has this 2 by 2. These are the expected solutions. For this, you write a code in a Python language, more or less, produce your quantum circuits, and then you measure. And in the end, you see that you get all the right results with a high probability, but due to the errors, due to the background, you get also a lot of noise here. It's not that much, but if you want to scale the system, this will be a tough task to solve in future. And so we are working as the Fraunhofer IAO here. We are working in the scope of Competence Center Quantum Computing Baden-Württemberg, as I said, which is introduced on stage Alice. And there are several funded research projects. We are one of them with total funding of 6 million. The overall funding is about 90 million. And we are funded by the Ministry of Baden-Württemberg. And this is a foundation for 2 years. And we are mostly looking at engineering of industrial and hybrid. It's important to emphasize industrial and hybrid quantum applications, because what we're doing is we are developing methods, tools, and processes with a very special aim to apply them already in industry. So we are developing, we are going to applications, we are linking ourselves to interested industry companies, and we are also educating in the industry and with our consortium partners, either on the conventional programmers on the high level, or also quantum software developers for more low level quantum algorithms. We are developing software's life cycles, creating tools which, like, use the Qiskit Aqua bibliography. We are enlarging this bibliography specialized to certain use cases, and we are developing software for this in kind of software life cycles. We are also funded for 2 years and are working strongly together with the University of Tübingen, with the Stuttgart IIS, with the HLRS, with the Fraunhofer FCD, IF, IPA, and we as an IO. And in one of our kickoffs, so that was very interesting for us. It's not representative, but that was a survey in the kickoff of our Sequoia research project. We asked, okay, where do you come from these companies, and why are you interested in quantum computing? And there, it distilled. So we saw that most of the companies which are aiming for applying quantum computing are large ones, but also a significant amount of small or medium-sized IT companies which are trying to provide quantum algorithms later on. Obviously, you also have these research institutions, politics, and press, which is for sure here not very representative, but that's the take-home message at least. And these large companies are interested in use cases we are developing them together with the industry. And you can separate these use cases in different sectors, energy, for example, in the energy sector. So roughly speaking, how to distribute or control, say, a certain distribution of e-mobile charging stations, of vaccination stations, of hydrogen pipelines, of wind farms, how to also not only locally, but also how to control, say, the energy, how to control these systems. And it's not only energy, it's also logistics. Say, if you want to have an optimal route planning for an industry, like you also, if you want to simulate things like smart cities or the traffic flow in these cities, you have also very large systems, which a lot of input, big data, which you need to operate on at the same time. So this is also something which is a potential use case. It's also in the area of production, which is very important in the state of Baden-Württemberg. There you have either the thing which, quantum computing was initially invented for, so Feynman predicted, for the material, for the molecule simulations, but also, say, for example, for the topology optimization of work pieces, if you want to reduce, say, for example, the surface of a certain work piece in comparison to its volume. Or also the optimization of scattering routines, the famous paint shop problems, which was one of the talks in the session, I guess, by WB. And there's all very famous use cases, or also in the area of finance, if you want to evaluate a portfolio or risk models, which is also an expected problem for quantum computing. And there's also a very important problem in cryptography. This is not only an option of better performance, speed up, it's like, it's a threat. You're already, not yet, theoretically, you're already on the stage that you can decrypt RSA encoded informations. It's not, the hardware is not ready yet, but it will be soon, and therefore you should be prepared already. It should make your data safe now, such that they cannot be saved and then decrypted later. And you can use this kind of entanglement, for example, also for information teleportation called. So if you read out one part of the qubit, the other one is read out as well. And all these use cases rely on a certain pool of algorithms, which were already invented in the years ago. So that's a Grover for unstructured search. That's a Shor for factorization. Then you have variational algorithms like quantum Ion solvers or quantum Fourier transformations. We don't to go into very detail to this, but we are actually working on how can these algorithms applied, and we are also trying to, based on these algorithms, try to develop new algorithms. And the question is, okay, you had these use cases. What is a criterion for a use case to be successfully implemented on a quantum computer? And as I said, for example, one of the main criteria is you need a high dimensional configuration space. That means a lot of data which need to be manipulated at the same time with a parallelization, and they can be very connected. The entanglement helps you also to calculate very highly dependent algorithms. On the other hand, you can have exponential or polynomial speedups in certain regimes like decryption and so on, Grover, Shor. And therefore, you can have a real-time resolutions of certain things like traffic simulations, or logistics, route planning, which is real-time resolved, like satellite things as well. And security, as I mentioned, is a threat and not an option. You should be prepared for this kind of for this area of post-quantum cryptography. And if you're only interested in, say, approximate solutions, algorithms which rely on approximate solutions are also very natural to solve, or better to solve on a quantum computer due to the pre-existing algorithms and the nature of quantum physics, like it's what Heisenberg called Unschärferelation. So German physicists, and so this kind of things which are rely on disk machines. What is no indicator for being better solved on a quantum computer is the class of NP complex problems. This might be the case. So things which are in the complex class of BQP might be, NP might be in BQP, but there's not proven yet. And and the other natural questions to ask for is what are the timescales for this? And here you see it. So the so-called quantum technology readiness level predicted by the superquantum set in Jülich. And there you see that the different hardwares are on a different level of near-term or industry realization. So while these annealers are already in use or very high level to be already applied to the industry. So the IBM Rigetti and so the superconducting qubits here, for example, they still need a bit of time, but they predict certain roadmaps with an exponential growth, and therefore they are expected to be, say, in the next 5 to 10 years, very competitive. But so let me emphasize that for a 42 qubit system, you already need such a supercomputer like Jubin, which have 300,000 CPUs and can operate like 10 to the power 15 operations per second, which is an incredibly large number. And you need this kind of CPUs to simulate 42 qubits. Inningham has 27, and IBM and Google, so nowadays, and IBM and Qubit are, by the end of 2030, are predicting, and they are faster than they predict so far, they are predicting 1 million qubits, which is extremely large and no way to simulate this classically anymore. And therefore, it will be a fundamental quantum revolution. But this will still take 5 to 10 years. But already, so they have all, let's say, a quantum volume of 10 to the power 2, so 100, say, roughly speaking. So 60 to 70 or 120. But it needs to be a potential of 2. But INQ already predicted, so that's in trapped ions, a quantum volume of 4 million, whatever this is, but it's amazingly large. So you would see that this, this will come soon. And so the recommendations which we want to give you as a company here are you can decide on which level you want to follow quantum computing, on which level you want to educate yourself. And so what can you do to be prepared today, to be prepared for tomorrow, decides what you want to have. So do you want to stay informed, meaning do you want to understand the physics, so the principles, and keep an eye on the development, say wait and see what's happening, then you might join only high-level webinars. For example, we at the IO, this is not everything, but just an illustrative thing. For example, we are giving talks, so-called talks like quantum cryptography or how to learn in industry to deal with quantum computations. Or you follow public channels. We are also blogging, for example, but we are not the only source for this, only as an example. Then you can say, okay, I want to have more, I want to have assessment, I want to understand the state of the art of quantum computers and really I want to estimate, qualified, if it's interesting for me, if there's a relevant thing for me. And there, for example, what I could really recommend are this kind of specialized QC talks, which have a low level, which go to the low level physics. If you want to stay qualified, you need to learn what the algorithms are. You need you can identify if they are relevant for you in your classical codes. Therefore, you should join either schools at the IO, but also IBM provides these kind of summer schools, for example. And if you really want to perform, that's where I want to end with, then you should if you want to embed your quantum solutions in classical things, if you want to write your own quantum programs, you need simulators to test, for example, and in the end with backends to calculate, which, for example, Inningen, but we are also providing tickets if you wish. And with this, I want to end. So this is our team on the IAO, so the quantum computation team. And we're really looking forward to interesting discussions, collaborations, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christian. That was very, very nice to hear, to see also the many potential use cases that you've showed here. And I think it's a very important job that you're doing, especially for a country like Germany, that you focus on the software engineering and development here. As we know, Germany is traditionally very strong in like hardware development, not that strong in software development. So I think you can really make a difference here for the future in at least for the quantum technologies. Thank you very much for the talk. We have one question here. I don't know, I think we can have a quick question. It says, which steps would you suggest to prepare for the post-quantum decryption threat?
Yeah, so first of all, one should, yes, so one should be prepared today. As I said, so if somebody stores your information and some informations are not that important, but if informations are stored today and can be decryptified in 5 to 10 years, that's bad. So you should try to now use new schemes or different than RSA to decrypt your informations. And there are different approaches. But this goes too long, I guess, to go into very detail. But yeah, RSA for sure should be exchanged, say.
Well, thank you for this short answer. Of course, you can go more into detail in the Speakers Corner, which you will head on to now, and also tomorrow on the same stage here on Stage Bob, we will have more on quantum communication and also post-quantum cryptography. So if you're interested, please feel free to join us here tomorrow too. So thanks again, Christian, and we are heading on to our next talk here. The next talk is called Leveraging Quantum Computing Applications for Companies of All Sizes. We have two speakers again. The first speaker is Tim Leonhardt. Tim Leonhardt actually holds multiple master degrees in physics as well as in economics, business, and management. He has 5 years of experience in semiconductor quantum computing research, and since 2018 he is responsible at Accenture for quantum computing innovation projects. Our second speaker is David Niehaus. He interestingly also holds 2 master's degrees, one in industrial engineering and one in aerospace management. So he's the head of product at Stone One's quantum product unit Anacor and community manager for the research project Planck, which is also the project that both of our speakers are going to talk about now. So welcome, Tim. Welcome, David. We're looking forward to your talk. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And after we've just heard the talk on quantum software engineering, I think it's very fitting that we now continue. You may hear other speakers also speak about Planck because we have lots of interesting use cases, and I'm very happy that we're present in such numbers. So welcome to our talk, Leveraging Quantum Computing Applications for Companies of All Sizes. What we would like to give you here is a very quick introduction to the research project Planck, which is being funded by the German government, particularly by the Ministry for Economic Affairs. And after introducing the project itself, where we show how we want to integrate the different stakeholders of the quantum ecosystem, which is also a major topic, of course, here on this conference, we'll want to show you a little bit of the methodology that was developed in the project to identify potential use cases. And Tim was happy to present one of from Accenture, one of the use cases more in detail. So without further ado, I'd like to start by going a little bit into the detail of what is Planck. Well, first of all, of course, it's named after Max Planck, but it stands for Platform and Ecosystem for Quantum Assisted Artificial Intelligence. And now you know why we call it Planck, because it's such a long name, but it's a great name. And the vision behind it is also great. What we intend to bring together here is the primary stakeholders of the quantum application lifecycle.
we have in Germany, but all over the world, companies that want to use quantum computing, that want to use respective applications to solve their individual needs. They can be large corporations, but they can also be small, medium-sized companies that do not necessarily have the budget to invest in research and development, but they still have potential use for quantum computing. We have solution partners. We have developers that are, for example, using new methods to program quantum circuits, but we also have consultants that need to advise those users that we spoke about earlier about their specific needs, whether quantum computing is actually something that can solve their problem. Then we have experts that further our understanding of quantum algorithms, that provide open source software. And last but not least, we have, of course, the providers. We can write the greatest code, doesn't bring us if we can't actually run it on one of these great new machines. So this is the fourth and final stakeholder that we want to bring together within Planck. I'm going to come to who that we is in just a minute. But prior to that, I want to show you a little bit of what is Planck actually about. Now, I said it's a platform. We consider it an open ecosystem, a platform of platforms with many different features planned. Those features are intended to serve each of those individual stakeholder groups. So what we currently have in closed beta, and just to answer that question, which will probably come right away, yes, we are planning to grant public access to Planck, hopefully by the end of this year. It's not something that is intended only for the initial Planck partners. So right now it's a knowledge platform to provide curated algorithm information, which is coming from academic and industrial experts, provides discussion material, provides the ability to collaboratively develop those information items, and to also provide associated implementations. They can be downloaded, and in the future they can also be executed through the platform to run on different hardware configurations. And that also brings us to those future features. Right, with this knowledge platform right now, we are particularly serving the areas of the solution partners and the experts, right? They know how to use this stuff. But in order to also enable companies that do not necessarily have that expert knowledge in their workforce, they will be able to participate to buy that knowledge, to gain that access through the marketplace by either issuing called for a specific application that they need or general applications. For that collaboration, we're also building a GDPR compliant data room so that secure data exchange can happen. Also, again, a feature which would connect both the user side as well as the solution partner side. And then for developers, we're particularly looking for enablers through our NISC analyzer and workflows, two future features that will enable the better use of quantum computers through already existing software development ideas. And through those functions, we hope to enable all the different stakeholders that I initially presented. Now I've mentioned we, and let me just give you a brief introduction. So Planck is a consortium. As I said, we're a research project. The consortium partners, you can see them here on the left-hand side of the slide. It's 19 different companies and institutions, academic institutions from Fraunhofer to University of Stuttgart, which holds the scientific directorship. And then, of course, from large multinational companies such as Tim's Accenture, down to small but exciting German startup companies such as HQS, which is also, of course, present in this conference here. I myself am with Stone One, which is also featured there. Now, we have these 19 consortium partners, but we also have received such a wide interest that we have opened up our associated partner side. So anybody who's interested in Planck is more than welcome to join us. We want to bring that knowledge out there.
And those associated partners can be seen here. As you can see, all those four stakeholder groups that I introduced earlier are represented. We have the quantum computing resource providers, we have solution partners, we have experts, and we also have potential users. One of the things that we wanted to work on when we started thinking about the vision of Planck was we do not only want to have this platform, but we want to have a proven ecosystem. So what does that mean? It means we have to demonstrate it with use cases. And so all the different partners brought together use cases from their individual needs, either from their clients or that they face themselves in their business. And here you can see actually the selection. We have more than 30 use cases. And what we're doing within this research project is that we are ascertaining whether quantum computing, first of all, can generate a benefit within this specific realm, but then also how can it be deployed via the platform. And this would then also serve to enable not only the partners itself, but also lead to a more lighthouse character of the project and understanding where all these different applications can be found for quantum computing. And one of those specific use cases, I'd like to hand over to Tim now to show us a little bit the methodology that we developed within the project and that we would like to publish here to grant access to. Tim.
Thank you very much, David, for this great introduction to Planck, and I'm happy to share with you a little bit the experience that we already made within the consortium, what we've learned, especially in looking into all these proposals that came to us with these use cases, and the experience that we made in the first 1.5 years to have an early assessment of these use cases and making sure that we are not only addressing, let's say, the business interest and the use cases that our partners find relevant, but also get a better understanding of what can be implemented and realized on quantum computers, supporting decisions. What is actually a good reference use case that can be implemented, and how far is the technology, and the methodology that we've come up with in this consortium that many consortium partners used in detail, that created in the end detailed requirements analysis and descriptions, concepts of how they approach and now implement these use cases I want to share with you now. The first side, and this is something where we try to start the connection, is always the question of what is actually the value that is should be generated by the solution. So it's not that we in the end want to use the technology just because it's fun, but in the end really want to understand where could it create some additional value for a user. So can we reduce costs, or can we maybe improve customer experiences? And we have collected a couple of guiding questions that I won't go into detail, but that helped us to sharpen the propositions, also maybe gain support, financial support when it was a very relevant use case. And then go to the next step of really discussing what is actually what could be some business problems when that, or some problems that occur in the transformation and assessment of the and implementation of the project. And a couple of questions that we discussed there is actually can we even now that we know that there's a business need, can we discuss with the future users or with the current colleagues that approach this problem? Can we exchange with them what quantum computing is, how quantum computing works, and develop an idea where it could actually a technical advantage is needed? Other topics and questions are, and this is something that David already addressed, questions of GDPR compliance, the question, do we have even access to the data? Can we use it? Does it maybe have the sufficient quality? So there are several regulatory issues that I think many incubation units would love to overcome. And I think Planck is a very good platform to share data and make sure that we have a similar platform like I don't know, Kaggle or others that help us to really get quickly into the terms that we want to use, which is the technical solution. And the last part of this, let's say, overview and business canvas that you create to early assess these use cases. On the quantum solution side, you already see a couple of guiding questions that we discussed in the beginning. Can we access the data? Do we have like a mathematical formal description of the problem and some solution approach? Also, what should be the output? But with this, I think I'll share on the next slide a more updated version. And this is actually something that we have published with colleagues from Accenture, where we build on this experience and other experiences to go from an early identification long list, very long list of use cases that could be relevant to business, to a shorter use case short list that is more likely to be realistically implemented on a quantum computer. Because I mean, we are all aware each of these use cases takes resources and ideas, and it would be good to identify early on what could run and what the expectations are that could be it on a solution, and that we expect on a running quantum computer in a few years, or maybe, and this is I think very interesting, on the basis that we've learned to build a new model or use new algorithms, maybe improve the classical algorithms that we used with the knowledge that we have from quantum algorithm research. And the main steps that we have identified, and this is not a strict stepwise approach, but these are like fields that we can look into, is at the first stage always to really discuss how to model this as a computational problem. So currently you definitely need some mathematical rigor to really understand how can I translate my business problem into a mathematical description. And this is something I think where Planck and service providers like us can help, is to really say, is this a problem that we can formulate in a mathematical description? And is this even a problem that we can also formulate in the quantum computing description? So this is the first checkpoint to make sure that we can really, let's say, go to the quantum realm with this problem. The next question is what we call the complexity sieve. So there's always a theoretical approach on whether this model that you have come up with is trivial. So for example, we won't use quantum computers for improving addition or multiplication of numbers. So it isn't a sensible quantum approach if it's already readily solved. And on the other hand, there are still problems that quantum computers can't solve. So we very likely won't solve the very big data problems because the input to a quantum machine is rather thin. And there are other topics where it's unlikely that quantum, or even proven that quantum computers cannot help. So really differentiating between the hype and the problems that are sensibly implemented and could be theoretically solvable is an important exercise. And their universities develop theories and help us to pinpoint where quantum advantage could happen for industry. The next question is always looking at the algorithms. How can we is it not only in principle possible, but are there actually algorithms or descriptions of how to solve these problems, be it by an approximation or other topics? And then the next question, and this is something that doesn't get that much attention, is actually that you also would need an implementation and, let's say, software. And there's always the challenge that at some points the algorithms are theoretically described but need an actual implementation that is efficient. And either you have the researcher resources to come up with this by yourself, or it makes a lot of sense to get help, and to check if these implementations are actually ready. And I think the repository that Planck is building is helping a lot there. So if you have done these steps, you can actually look into the details. And if you want to read more, look for the Digitale Welt that is published by LMU and Professor Linhoff Poppin to get more details. And the last 2 minutes that we have, I want to use to quickly go through an idea and an example that is broadly known to give you an idea of how this can be approached. So this use case example is actually the risk analysis, where a bank typically hands out credits. And of course, they want to make sure that if they have several defaults that can happen, that their reserves are big enough, and they are at some point limited to hand out more credit because the risk would be just too big. And the big challenge is even if you've gotten all the input values, like the exposure that you have, yeah, so how many credits do you have given out? You have also the properties of your obligor, so you know what is the rough probability of each of them to fall out. Maybe you also have information that they're interdependent. Yeah, so for example, if people are living close to each other or are, let's say, somehow related commercially, it's likely that they default at the same time. So you have already good description of the overall network. The biggest challenge is still to let's say, to put a number on if you're looking at the 10% worst cases, what is the outcome that you can expect? And for this, you typically, you formulate many scenarios, you calculate expectation values, yeah, you average over them. And the big challenge is that when you're getting more and more of these scenarios, is to efficiently evaluate them. Yeah? And if you look at this now from a perspective to optimize how you hand out credits, it's even an NP-hard problem to decide how to perfectly distribute this. So there are actually models today that can approximate these outcomes and these assessments, and they scale, yeah, with 1/n. So the more samples you take of these scenarios, the better your approximation becomes, but there's still some uncertainty. Now, the idea is that quantum computing can actually improve this, but there's still discussions on whether these speedups can be gained on a error-corrected quantum computer. Yeah? And I think there's still many open questions, and with this, I think I'll leave it to the discussions.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we hope you learned something. We're open for your questions. And I think Oliver Holschke is already standing in line to also present a Planck use case.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Tim and David, for this very nice introduction to the Planck project. When we arranged this this program, we intentionally placed the more use cases, the real use cases, and the overview of use cases. At the end, it's very nice to see this working out with the presentations now. Thank you so much once again for your presentation. As with the other speakers, you will be both available in the speakers corner now, in the Meet the Speakers section. So to our audience, feel free to directly address more questions or discussions there. And as was already mentioned, our next speaker is also speaking about the Planck project. It's also our last speaker, our last presentation for today on stage Bob. His name is Oliver Holschke, and he is Architect Future Networks and AI Program at the Telecom Innovation Laboratories, or short T-Labs. He investigates quantum technologies there, and his focus topics are quantum communication and security and quantum annealing for combinatorial optimization. Welcome, Oliver, and I'm looking forward to your talk now.
Yeah, thank you, Roman. Hello, everybody. My name is Oliver, and I work for T-Labs, which is part of the Deutsche Telekom group, and we do R&D there. And the focus topics, Roman mentioned them just now, is quantum technologies, and within several technologies, quantum computing is also of interest to Deutsche Telekom. And today I would like to show you how we are involved in the Planck project, which is funded also by the Ministry of Economics and Technology. And you just heard a presentation by Tim and David about that project. And I will give you an overview of the use cases that we are bringing into the project and that we are investigating with regards to quantum computing. So just a quick intro slide on the T-Labs. So that is what we do. I work in Berlin, and we explore and develop technology options for more powerful communications, security, and computing. When it comes to quantum technologies, actually for all these three, this is of relevance. But when it comes to the project Planck, the emphasis is on the computational capabilities that we are evaluating there. So what can you expect over the next 20 minutes? So I would like to tell you about our initial approach regarding the Planck project, how we framed the problems there, and what our objectives are in the project. Then I'm giving you an overview of use cases that we're addressing, and give you a little bit of rationale there, why DT is taking them, is looking at them. And then the third point, then a general methodology. So how we usually approach these use case transpositions, you could say, yeah, to do that with quantum computing. It's there's lots of steps are then repeating in themselves. And then I just dive deeper a little bit on one of the use cases, just to give you a little bit an impression of then how that looks like when a QUBO is developed, yeah, and then how different models are looked at and what we learn by doing that, and in the end then the learnings that we gather through this Planck project. Okay, so our approach of the T-Labs in Planck, so we want to explore this application potential, definitely, of quantum computing with regard to industrial use cases. So we have to select some applications that are somewhat meaningful to customers of ICT. And then we want to get started simple, yeah, and get our hands dirty, basically, and use quantum computing and get some first results. Yeah, could be start with simple problems and then take it from there. Yeah, expand the complexity, and by that learn about it. Yeah, and learn about all the parts that are necessary to go from end to end. Yeah, then if it's possible, then of course we want to do benchmarking. Yeah, is it really better than what we currently do? Of course, then we would need to have a comparable problem size, yeah, a comparable problem complexity. Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's a starter, yeah, with a smaller problem, but then we will get there. Yeah, it's also about learning alternative problem framing. You know, just looking at a problem a bit differently in a quantum way, you could say, decomposing a problem. Yeah, so these just looking at the problem a bit differently. That's also a good opportunity when approaching this with quantum computing. And of course, we want to engage with the domain expert colleagues in the Planck consortium, which is excellent because this fertilizes then the discussion on problems we have, equivalent problems in other domains that will be fruitful then to what we do. So this is a really great people network, of course. So the use cases that we have been addressing so far during the first 16 months, you can see them here. It's 5 basically. The last one is a bit of a box, the inspiration for further use cases. This is of course what we will do then in Planck in the coming months, but also it's an inspiration for if we look internally, right, into internal domains of the DT group, that's of course very fruitful. So what do we have here? We have a job shops scheduling. Why could that be interesting? DT has also an ICT integrating business with T systems, with customers in the industry, quite huge organizations, and also manufacturing. So combining that with computing services is always interesting and a business opportunity. And there has been some experience before there in that department. The next one, field service optimization. That's something really like easy to relate to, yeah, because the Deutsche Telekom service is out there and fixing problems, and there's a lot of them, yeah. And how do they do their tours, and is that actually done in an optimal way? And then there's a road traffic optimization. There's a connection to smart cities. And then there's two more that are internally. The IP traffic engineering and the anomaly detection. Here's some more points for the background on these use cases. So there's like 7,000 colleagues in the field service, for example, just to give you like a number, yeah, how many are out there and how many tours that are and how many to how many jobs that relates to. The road traffic optimization, that's a problem then for switching traffic lights to control traffic congestion. So there is also with T-Systems some business opportunities targeted towards a smart city. Yeah, it's fair to say that it's maybe not the first thing that comes to mind, yeah, when thinking of Deutsche Telekom, but there is these overlaps of domains that makes it interesting also to attend to these problems. And then number 4 and 5 that are really core business, yeah, IP traffic engineering. You have problems there called like multi-commodity flow routing, more a theoretical problem, because in practice we are dealing with shortest path routing or segment routing. This is then really a daily business and also evolving. And for that, benchmarkings can be done because there it's quite easy to look at the way things are done right now, really in the domain, right, by the colleagues and the subject matter experts. And a newer case here, the number 5, the anomaly detection in network flow data, for example. Yeah, it can be in other data streams. There we are going towards learning, yeah, because the first 4 are more on combinatorial optimization, but here with this one we are starting to get into machine learning cases and doing those on with quantum computing. To get labeled data sets is not as easy as it maybe would seem, even if you're in the organization. But it's a very layered and complex system in the status quo with yeah, just different systems involved. And to really get to labels like this anomaly means this bug or error is actually, it's not so straightforward, as you have to really dive deep into your own organization. Yeah? And being in an R&D unit is also kind of being at the periphery sometimes. But it's definitely our objective to also get to that data to do good benchmarking. Okay, then that was an overview of the use cases we have addressed, and now it's a very short wrap up about how these are addressed methodologically. So what people in our team usually do, right? It starts with a problem mapping. So this maybe even interesting if you're targeting something similar in your organization. So for us, it means to really get in touch with the domain experts. And this already sparks very interesting discussions. It also helps to, or it can engage the domain as well, yeah, to get them also excited about this technology option, yeah, to do things on a quantum computer. And this can be already quite constructive, yeah, this first problem mapping approach, if you have the domain on board. Then, of course, some translation work has to be done to get these things into what are the variables, what are the objectives, what are the constraints, and develop them. And then ultimately it turns into this Hamilton operator. So we get it into some energy function that we then want to minimize. So that is always a step involving lots of loops, yeah, to get to the right one there. And then, of course, it's not like in that sequence, yeah. The step number 4, because it happens in parallel in a way, leveraging the state of the art. Yeah, what is out there, because lots of things are being published. Also presenting QOs for maybe the exact problem you have or something very similar. So this can be very inspirational, and this should be tapped. It's a great resource, and lots of things are on archive nowadays. It's kind of easy to get. You just have to invest in a little bit of search there. Of course, the Planck partners, the consortium, a great resource, yeah, to discuss maybe similar problems, yeah, that are maybe compatible. It's always very fruitful, yeah, to get insights from maybe adjacent domains. And then the internal domains, I already mentioned them. Usually, or ideally, you get them from the very beginning. Then there's a step of programming the hardware, actually, the quantum computer. So what we have done in the use cases I showed, that's usually so Fujitsu with the digital annealer, then also a D-Wave. That's what we have done, and we're now in the process of doing a use case also on the IBM Q. So we're just in the prep works for that. The Fraunhofer network is basically handling the access to that machine in Ehningen, and right now the contractual work is, I think, being reviewed, and once that is through, we'll get one of our colleagues then to execute something on the IBM Q. So that would be then in a way the third hardware, yeah, we would be exploring. In the end, of course, an execution, a result, and then a comparative evaluation, some kind of benchmarking. Does it really move the needle? Yeah, if we can compare it, that's of course then the most interesting step then for the domain, the internal domain. Not really for us as R&D, because we want to learn these things step by step. But then with regard to the impact, of course, this comparative evaluation is crucial, yeah, eventually. All right, so this was an overview of the methodology. What we go through these steps. And now it's just a little deep dive. Yeah, I won't go into formulas. It's just to give an impression. I took the field service optimization problem here, and it was actually done by a colleague that was with us, Theo Körner. He's maybe in this here in the audience, who did that and approached it with various models involving, let's say, the most obvious variables and constraints, these job visits, yeah, at customer sites. Then there's a central depot, yeah, the people have to return to, and then formulating the energy function for that. Also finding out then there's strengths and weaknesses with the different problems. Sometimes there's very prohibitive constraints that are being introduced that really eat up a lot of resources that also came up. And in the end, it's actually also further operational constraints that remain open. So this is what that was kind of an intermediate step here with these operational constraints that really needed to be considered from practice, but they weren't addressed at the time, but are being addressed now, because we already went further with this. So Ming, another colleague, who basically took the problem on and went deeper and tried to map more variables into it. So just to illustrate it a bit, so the skill requirements of the service, of the field service, is of course also a constraint. Not everyone knows everything for every job, but there has to be some matching and clustering of these things. Then there can be like instant priorities. Yeah, different jobs have different priorities. Something could be very urgent. Yeah, that changes things, of course, on the fly, maybe. Then there could be access limitations to the actual house. Yeah, so for example, opening times of some company, or let's say parking availability. Yeah, you name it. These are all very practical further constraints that must be considered to get to the real optimization problem. And then the last one that was really something that in the first phase was not considered, but now Ming has introduced it into the QBO, is the actual work duration. So the duration of time is actually, of course, naturally, it's a resource. So getting from A to B is not the same as getting from A to C, and how much time you would expect to spend on a job, yeah, is also, of course, what has to be considered. And this is what's being done at the moment. So I already see Roman, and I come to my last slide. So Planck is a great project, yeah. So we thank the Ministry for Economics and Technology. It brings together people working on similar challenges. The quantum community, computing community in Germany is, I think, everybody's talking to everyone. I think it's very dense. It's a great network. The discussions, they sharpen the focus, yeah, also for our challenges ahead of us. We have the opportunity to get to different quantum computing hardware and platforms. And overall, it's a great catalyst, yeah, to get to deeper quantum computing understanding for an industry partner, yeah, for rather a user of this. It just accelerates things a lot. So thank you very much for your attention. And with this, I would I stop, and it's the last slot, right? And we want to end the day, maybe.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I think that was a great conclusion to this block and also to our stage today, showing more in detail now on the Planck project, especially how you make best use of the possibilities there, what you've already achieved, and where we are going with that, and how you can use all the different, make use of this partner network and can use the different hardwares as well. So thank you very much for this talk. Like the other speakers, Oliver will be available in the speaker section, in the Meet the Speaker section afterwards now. So if you are interested in engaging with him and further discussions, have further questions, please feel free to meet him there. Thank you once again, Oliver. And yeah, as he has already mentioned, we are at the end of today's program on stage Bob. On stage Alice, it's actually still going on. We are having our fireside chat on stage Alice now for another 40 minutes approximately until we are through with today's program of the Quantum Summit. But we will be back tomorrow. We will be back tomorrow on both stages, of course. On stage Alice, we will start at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and on stage Bob, that means here, we will start at 9:10. We have a lot of further very interesting talks tomorrow. While today we concentrated on quantum computing almost entirely in this section on stage Bob, tomorrow we will have different focuses. We will first have a focus on quantum communication and cryptography tomorrow. Afterwards we will focus on quantum sensing. And towards the end we will have another short section on quantum computing and simulation. With that, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for being with us today. I want to thank you for following our presentations, our Quantum Summit, for engaging with us in the chat and with the speakers. And I hope we see you again tomorrow. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow, and goodbye.